Chapter 1582. Cough 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 cough. Dustless felt awkward as he looked at Azure Feather, who was about to take off her clothes. He coughed a few times to stop her as he cursed her for being shameless. After all, it was Nina Dillard who was in Azure Feather's body and not her own consciousness. Dustless was also not interested in her 2 lumps of flesh. "If you think it's unfair for me to watch you bathe, then it's fair for me to take off my clothes for you to see," Nina Dillard said proudly as she took off her clothes. "However, after so many years, there are still people who know my name. Looks like I'm famous now. That's enough." Seeing that this guy was about to show his sincerity, Wu Chen hurriedly climbed out of the bathtub. Ignoring his wet body, he directly put on his pajamas and stopped him in a bad mood. "You have to be honest. Also, please understand that your body now belongs to Miss Lan Yu. If you want to take it off yourself and not someone else's." "That's true." Nina Dillard was stunned as she scratched her head awkwardly. Thank you for reminding me. Otherwise, I would have forgotten all about it." Dustless didn't know whether to laugh or cry as he rubbed his nose helplessly. "If you have anything to say, just say it. When you turned into a red liquid and entered Azure Feather's body, I noticed it. I didn't do anything to you because I didn't think you had any ill intentions. At the same time, I hope you won't do anything stupid. Otherwise, I will kick you out of her body." "Of course." Nina Dillard felt that Dustless's words were harsh, but she wasn't angry. She knew that Dustless was telling the truth. Back then, she had been hiding in Asakash's body. She had witnessed with her own eyes how Asakash had crushed Vatler. The entire process had been a one-sided slaughter, a one-sided battle filled with malice. "I didn't have a choice." Trying to lower her voice, Nina Dillard said with a headache, "You know that Tenzuka Gong took the sage's spiritual blood. His goal is to revive the sage. Although the sage is not as terrifying as Vatler, he is still a troublesome character." "What do you plan to do?" Dustless asked calmly. "I hope to borrow your strength to defeat him." Seeing that Dustless was not angry, Nina Yadalak relaxed and said, "To tell you the truth, Tenzuka Gong was one of my former apprentices. I know what kind of person he is. That kind of crazy guy can do anything. You don't want him to hurt your friend, do you? If you just want me to kill Tenzuka Gong, I can promise you." Dustless was surprisingly easy to talk to. He snorted coldly and said, "If it wasn't for Vatler's interference and Tenzuka Gong's long legs and fast running speed, I would have crippled that eyesore long ago. That's for the best." Nina Yadalak's heart calmed down when she heard that. She said apologetically, "I didn't expect to cause so much trouble to my descendants after being dead for so many years. I'm really sorry. It's not your fault." Dustless waved his hand, indicating that she did not need to be apologetic. He was quite satisfied with Nina Yadalak's attitude. Anyway, he hated and disliked Tenzuka Gong. The next time they met, he could just kill him. It was not a problem. "I heard that Shelley and Cannon are going to participate in the research in a few days. This is the best opportunity. Tenzuka Gong will definitely come when he hears about it." Dustless's words revealed a strong murderous intent. Nina raised her eyebrows and was speechless. "Are you going to use them as bait? If there is an accident, the consequences will be unimaginable. I advise you to think twice before you act." "Accident?" Dustless curled his lips disapprovingly. Then, he chuckled and said, "Life is only beautiful when it is full of surprises. If everything goes as expected, what fun is there?" Time flew. In the blink of an eye, 3 days had passed. At the port, the cruise ship slowly sailed out of the port. Then, it gradually sped up. It gradually lost its texture and turned into a tiny black dot. "Such a crazy plan is really suitable for you." Nangong Natsuki held a black umbrella elegantly. The young man in casual clothes next to her was Dustless. "What are you afraid of?" "I left the warlocks of the Flying Thunder God with them. If Shelley and Cannon are in danger, I can show up at any time to help them." Dustless explained calmly. You can persuade them to be bait. You're very advanced in deceiving women. Nangong Natsuki nodded like a chick pecking at rice. She seemed to admire Dustless's methods. She even gave him a thumbs up. However, Dustless knew it was derogatory. Don't worry. That clown will definitely die in the Tiantong tribute this time. That idiot doesn't know what's good for him. He managed to escape 3 or 4 times. That brat is lucky. But where can he run to in the sea? Dustless sneered. He had already sentenced Tenzuka Gong to death in his mind. Jijua, Shelley, and Cannon were just bait. His goal was to lure Tenzuka Gong, the idiot, to take the bait. There were hundreds of thousands of people on Itagami Island. It would be difficult to find Tenzuka Gong among the sea of people. Therefore, Dustless wanted to use this opportunity to lure Tenzuka Gong. Tenzuka Gong couldn't wait to revive the sage, so he would use this opportunity to ambush Shelley and Cannon. Dustless could also get rid of this hidden rat in one fell swoop. Chapter 1583. His resolute eyes were full of coldness. Wuchen quietly stared at the cruise ship in the distance. His eyes were full of calmness. To be honest, perhaps because he was overconfident, he was not worried at all. Even if there was an accident, he could still use the outer path, reincarnation technique to revive himself. Maybe that's why he was so confident. No matter what, Dustless was in an invincible position. Speaking of which, our Special Regions Police Force was attacked a few days ago and we lost something important. Natsuki seemed to have thought of something and reminded, the submarine was stolen. Is that so? Hearing that, Wuchen just responded faintly. Then, he turned around and left leisurely as if everything had nothing to do with him. However, the moment he turned around, a raging red light flashed in his eyes. If I'm not wrong, it should be Amatsuka Gong's doing. Wuchen left while muttering something. Wuchen's lips curled into a smile as if he had succeeded in his plot. Ha ha ha. That damn pervert finally got careless this time. I thought that he would protect those 2 little girls at all times. Finally, I got the chance. Looking at Dustless leaving safely, Amatsuka Gong smiled crazily. He was really unlucky these days. Everything was well prepared. Only with the existence of Wuchen, Tianzhong Gong did not dare to take half a step into the thunder pool. Who let the disparity in strength make him stop at a glance? Now that Dustless was finally angry with Jijua Shelley and Hane's Cannon, Amatsuka Gong was very excited. Buzz buzz buzz. The golden skull in his hand glowed brightly as if urging Amatsuka Gong to hurry up. Don't rush me. I will take a boat and follow them. I hope you will keep your promise then. Amatsuka Gong's face twisted with excitement. He sneaked out of the port and sneaked into the place where he hid the submarine. Will that guy really come? Looking at the white clouds in the sky and the warm sunlight, Hane's Cannon closed her eyes and stared at the ocean in the distance. She seemed to be looking for Amatsuka Gong. It should be. Seniors, Dustless's, predictions are rarely wrong. Jijua Shelley nodded slightly. She was carrying a black bag, which contained the snow cloud wolf. Let's go eat first. Jijua Shelley chuckled. After finding that there was nothing unexpected, she dragged Kanan to have lunch with her. However, the peaceful atmosphere did not last long, as an accident soon occurred. Boom boom boom. The cruise ship suddenly shook violently, followed by a huge explosion. Bang! Jijua Shelley and Hane's Cannon were caught off guard. Jijua Shelley was fine, after all, she was a cultivator, but Hane's Cannon was different. Her legs immediately turned red and swollen, and she could no longer move. Who did it? Jijua Shelley scanned the surrounding area with her eyes, like tidewater. However, to her disappointment, there was nothing above the sea, nothing had attacked them. The threat is coming from underwater, Hane's Cannon guessed. I. That white-haired kid suddenly became so smart. What a surprise. An arrogant voice came from the sky, and a man wearing a white shirt and a checkered hat entered their sight. It was Amatsuka Gong, whose face was twisted with malice. It took me a lot of effort to hunt you two little kittens. Compensate me with your lives, and I will forgive your crimes. Amatsuka Gong laughed maniacally. Where did this guy come from? Jijua Shelley looked at the bottom of the ship and saw an army green submarine. She immediately understood what was going on, and her delicate face became colder. You attacked us with a torpedo from a submarine, and you don't care about the lives of others. You are indeed a lunatic. Jijua Shelley said in an unfriendly tone. She had already taken out the snow cloud wolf. Do researchers carry weapons? Sword wizard, you are so careful. Amatsuka Gong looked at the snow cloud wolf and frowned. He was surprised by Jijua Shelley's action. That's because, an indifferent voice resounded in the sky. Amatsuka Gong heard the voice that he didn't want to hear the most. His proud old face suddenly turned green, then blue, then white. It was very interesting. Although it is a scientific research, it is normal for accidents to happen. To deal with a clown like you, I asked her to wear it secretly. Do you understand now? I've been waiting for you. Dow Breaker number 90, Black Coffin. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. The black light from the sky was cruel and merciless, and it directly crushed Amatsuka Gong. Although he realized the danger and tried to dodge, he was still inevitably torn into pieces by the number 90 Dow Breaker. Poochie. 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 Tian Zhonggong's body was instantly torn apart, turning into a pile of scrap metal. It was very miserable. It was cut into pieces by the black blade, as miserable as tofu. Idiot, I only let you steal the submarine on purpose. Do you really think you're so smart that you're an unparalleled genius in scheming? By the way, this so-called scientific research, I'm sure you understand now. It's just a trap to lure you into it. You think your plan has succeeded. Tell me, are you a pig? Hearing what Dustless said, Amatsuka Gong was stunned. He stared at Dustless, who was beaming with joy, and couldn't help but spit out a mouthful of blood. Cough, cough, sorry, there was a power outage at home today. Chapter 1584. This kid has a good body. Lin Fan stared at Amatsuka Gong. It was too hard for this guy to be his enemy. With Dustless's current power level, Amatsuka Gong wouldn't be able to compete with Dustless even if he was 100 years weaker. However, everyone had their own unique way of living. Perhaps Amatsuka Gong's unique ability to recover after being smashed was his unique ability. Just barely. Dustless gave a decent answer. You, looking at Wu Qin, who was so close to him, Tenzuka Gong's eyes were about to crack. His eyeballs were about to fall out of their sockets. The majestic killing intent that he had accumulated spread out like a tide. So this is all part of your plan? Trying to lure me out? Amatsuka Gong tried his best to suppress the anger in his heart. His face looked like he was constipated. No wonder his right eye kept twitching these days. Dustless had tricked him. That's right. There are so many people on Itagami Island. It's not easy to find someone. Dustless told him the truth. Looking at Amatsuka Gong's pale face, Lin Fan was happy. This fat rat had been hiding for so long, and now he was willing to come out and die. You want to kill me? Not so fast. With a ruthless determination in his eyes, Tenzuka Gong turned his gaze to the others. There was no other way. Dustless, this cheating player, was too terrifying as an enemy. He could only win by attacking others. Unavoidably, his gaze landed on GMO Shelley and Issei Xia in the end. Although GMO Shelley was also very strong, but compared to Dustless, if this guy could be an enemy, he would be too cute. Although GMO Shelley was also a thorny rose, but to Tenzuka Gong, it was no different from spring. Swoosh swoosh swoosh. Amatsuka Gong gathered explosive power under his feet and dove towards GMO Shelley. Swoosh swoosh swoosh. His speed was so fast that it was like a gust of wind. One could only see the tail but not the head of the dragon. Die. His hand condensed into a huge metal blade, and his twisted face looked extremely scary. When he was a few meters away from Jijua Shelley, Gong Tenzuka suddenly leaped up and chopped towards Kanae Natsuya with his shiny blade. What a despicable fellow! Jijua Shelley was infuriated. She did not expect Tenzuka Gong to be so despicable. He had purposely attacked her, but his real target was Kanae's cannon, who was so weak. What worried Jijua Shelley the most was that Amatsuka Gong had attacked too quickly, and she did not have the time to help Cannon. Cannon was about to be captured by Amatsuka Gong. Ah! The world is degenerating day by day. If I remember correctly, you're just an artificial life form. Seriously, you're obviously created by humans, but you're playing tricks in front of humans. What a joke, a light voice came. Dustless glanced at him coldly. With a thought, Tenzuka Gong's body suddenly went out of control. Damn it! Tenzuka Gong was furious. Kanae's cannon was right in front of him, but he could not move an inch. A strong gravitational force made him unable to resist. Wanxiang Heaven's pull. With a slight push, Tenzuka Gong's body flew over. Heaven's cloud soared. At the same time, a golden light flashed in Dustless's hand, and a straight sword was formed in an instant. Staring at Tenzuka Gong's head, Dustless raised his blade and hacked down mercilessly. Poochie! Tenzuka Gong's head was chopped off by the blade. However, the split body turned into liquid metal and reassembled under the shocked gazes of Jijua Shelley and Kanae's cannon. Tenzuka Gong, who was killed by Dustless, was restored to his original state. What kind of monster is this guy? Jijua Shelley was shocked. Such a heaven-defying skill meant that he had an immortal body. He, Tenzuka Gong laughed viciously. I am a perfect life form. You want to kill me? You can only dream about it. Idiot. Hearing him, Dustless curled his lip disdainfully and said sarcastically, Your dream is to become a human being, right? No, not a human being. In your mind, you are a human being, right? Of course. Tenzuka Gong nodded proudly. As long as I bring Sage back to life, he will give me back the other half of his body, and I will be a human being again. Idiot. Dustless sneered again when he heard that and said, Could it be that you haven't noticed it yourself? Your ability is not human. After all, you are just an artificial life form. You can never become a human being. Bullsh *T. Tenzuka Gong was enraged. His heart was hurt, and he looked especially ferocious. He yelled hysterically, As long as I bring Sage back to life, he will give me back the other half of his body. Forget it. There is no point in talking nonsense. Let's finish you. Dustless stared at Tenzuka Gong's body, and his eyes suddenly turned cold. Finish me? Tenzuka Gong murmured. He looked at Dustless with disdain, and looked at Dustless with disdain as well. It was not that he was confident. Even if his body was broken, it could be repaired without limit, which meant that he was almost immortal. Clearing his throat, Gong Amatsuka said loudly, No one. However, before he could finish, he felt a piercing pain all over his body. A black flame quickly devoured him, and within a second, he was revived. Tensho. Ah. Ah. So hot. A painful voice came out of Tenzuka Gong's body. He was lying on the ground and rolling crazily. His voice was filled with pain, and both his body and mind were severely damaged. Chapter 1585. Gong Tenzuka screamed hysterically, but no one cared about him. Who asked him to be so despicable? He deserved to be burned by Amaterasu. Gong Tenzuka was tossing and turning in the black flames, screaming miserably. Amaterasu will slowly devour. His body separated from his body? Dustless frowned. He noticed that Gong Tenzuka's body had turned into liquid metal. Then, a large amount of liquid was secreted out of his body. His clothes were covered by the black flames. Just like a clone, another Gong Tenzuka was slowly forming. These days, seeing the situation, Dustless sighed lightly, knowing that he failed again. You're just a weak little insect, but your ability is so novel and refined. You're a weirdo, but there's a world of difference between you and ordinary people. Dustless sounded like he was praising Gong Tenzuka, but his tone was full of sarcasm. Humph. Hearing this, Gong snorted coldly. In his heart, he knew that Wu Chen was mocking him for being useless in disguise. Taking a closer look, Tenzuo Gong was in an incomparably miserable state. Although he had not died, he had been ravaged to the point that he did not look like a human anymore. His face was completely different, and his entire body was filled with the smell of burnt metal. The pungent smell made people frown and feel extremely uncomfortable. I will take revenge on you. Gong Tenzuka swore. At the same time, he waved his hand and countless spikes shot out. He knew that it was useless against Dustless, so he decided to attack Kanase instead. She was the weakest among them. Who else could he bully if not Gong Tenzuka? Shoo shoo shoo. Looking at the incoming light, Kanase Cannon's eyes flashed with fear. She subconsciously took a few steps back. After all, she was just an ordinary human. Despicable rat. When Wu Chen saw this, he could not help but be filled with murderous intent. Seeing Tenzuka Gong's smug expression, this brat probably really thought that he could not do anything to him and could only helplessly stare at him. His way of thinking was simply too ignorant. Dustless raised his right arm and aimed his palm at Kanase. He activated his gravitational force and grabbed her. 10,000 heavenly attraction. Clang, 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 clang. All of the Amaterasu tribute's attacks landed on the deck of the ship. Kanase Cannon had already landed behind Dustless and escaped the merciless attacks of the Amaterasu tribute. I'll let you enjoy a move that only super experts can experience. TSK. You're lucky. The one who died the worst by his hands was Vatler. Dustless's eyes were as sharp as a knife, full of hostility. He decisively took out a red tachi. Buzz buzz buzz, the blade was simple and unadorned, and it was filled with an ancient aura. Before the tachi could erupt with its own deterrent power, an indescribable heat swept through the sky. Bankai Remnant Flame Tachi. Dustless mercilessly unleashed Zenka no Tachi, and a wisp of hot steam immediately emerged from the blade. Then, the moisture in the air instantly disappeared, and the water stains on the sea also began to evaporate at an accelerated rate. Not only that, but everything in the surroundings also began to evaporate into nothingness. What's going on? Amaterasu tribute screamed in horror. He found that his body was gradually shrinking and slowly disappearing. This inexplicable feeling made him break out in cold sweat. He subconsciously looked at Dustless and asked, "Did you do this?" The essence of Zenka no Tachi is 15 million degrees Celsius of spiritual pressure. Do you think you can still survive under 15 million degrees Celsius? Everything will disappear. Damn it. Tenzuka Gong cursed. The moment the heat appeared, his body disappeared without a trace. He was completely vaporized by the horrifying heat. If Dustless did not deliberately avoid the ship, he would also have instantly disappeared into nothingness. Clang 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 clang. At this moment, a golden skull fell from the sky. It was extremely dazzling, as if it was made of pure gold. You're the culprit, right? Dustless stared at the golden skull and asked calmly. Cough cough cough, a strange sound came, and the golden skull suddenly flashed with a gorgeous light. Then, a hazy shadow rushed out of the skull, and the dazzling light made everyone close their eyes. Why do you resist the great me? You're just an imperfect life form, and yet you want to resist the perfect me. This is treason, an unforgivable crime. The golden shadow spoke in human language, full of arrogance and arrogance. You call yourself a perfect life form? Ridiculous. You need the help of others to resurrect, and you dare to say that you're perfect? Sure enough, like master, like servant. Amaterasu tribute is a retard, and it's all because of you. Dustless sneered. He knew that the culprit had come to the surface, the sage. Retard? The golden halo twitched a few times and said angrily, "You, a lowly life form, can't understand my greatness at all. Even if this planet is destroyed, without food, oxygen, and water, I can still survive. So, that's why. You think you're a perfect life form? Superior to others?" Dustless heard this and laughed involuntarily. If it was so simple and perfect, then he had encountered countless perfect life forms, and he was one of them. Without food, oxygen, and water, it was just a trivial matter for him. "It's useless to explain my greatness to a lowly life form like you. You will never understand." The sage was too lazy to talk nonsense. His body, which was just a shadow, turned from nothingness to reality, and became a dazzling golden body. "If I sell it, it must be worth a lot of money." Looking at that dazzling golden body, Dustless's subconscious words made the sage's head swell. Chapter 1586. Blasphemy, blasphemy, blasphemy. This is blasphemy to the great me. The golden sage was furious. He didn't expect Dustless to be so arrogant and audacious. Looking at Dustless's eyes, the golden sage's hair stood on end. He could read something else from those eyes. If he sold it, it would be worth a lot of money. "You damned bastard, I'm going to kill you." The sage opened his mouth full of fangs and roared. A dazzling and destructive beam of light was formed in an instant. "You two, stay away." Dustless turned his head and glanced at Joshua Shelley and Canon Hennace. "That beam of light is useless against me, but you two might still be severely injured." "Understood." The two women nodded wisely. Then, they turned around and left. They ran to a relatively safe place to hide. Boom! 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 The beam of light expanded to its limit and covered Dustless. His whole body turned silver and shone so brightly that no one dared to look at him directly. "Bring it on." Dustless crooked his finger. There was no fear on his face. Instead, there was provocation. He stared at the sage as if he was looking at a street rat. He didn't even try to hide the mockery in his eyes. "Die." The sage was furious. He opened his mouth and released a powerful attack. Swoosh! 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 Thick beams of light fell from the sky towards Dustless, who was on the deck. The size of the beam was so exaggerated that the void shook slightly as if it could collapse at any time. "Ha ha ha." The sage's mouth was full of fangs. He laughed as if victory was within his grasp. "This beam of light is powerful enough to flatten a mountain. I know you are strong, but if you are hit by it, you will die for sure. Ha ha ha, and you will never dodge it." The sage laughed arrogantly as if he had seen through Dustless's thoughts. However, his laughter, which was similar to the sound of metal colliding, was really unflattering. "This gold twinkle is very smart." Dustless stared at Sage in surprise. If he dodged, the beam would hit the entire ship, and all the students, Kinace Cannon, and Joshua Shelley would fall into the water. "Then let's just blast it away." Dustless raised his fist as he looked up at the blinding light that was charging towards him. "Humph, do you think your fists are made of iron?" A sneer came from the sage's throat. Not only was the power of the falling light beam astonishing, but it also carried a scorching attack. If one touched it with their bare hands, their entire arm could be burned off at any time. Just because you can't do it doesn't mean that others can't. Dustless's eyes slightly solidified, staring at the light falling down, whispering softly, "Armament hockey hardening." Boom boom boom. Then, Dustless decisively punched out at the right time. Bang bang bang. The falling light beam was stopped in an instant, all the light was blocked by Dustless's fist, and he himself was motionless, and there was no discomfort on his handsome cheeks. Gulp. Sage was shocked and choked for a moment, looking at the light that was caught by Dustless. He was shocked and said, "Is this guy's fist really made of iron? Go back to where you came from." Glancing coldly at Sage, Dustless's right fist exerted a little force, and the stalemate light instantly collapsed and flew straight towards Sage's head. It's back. Sage's mouth twitched when he saw this. He increased the horsepower of his legs and planned to escape, but it was too late. Dustless used an even more powerful force to fight back the light. Boom, 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 boom. Sage's body was swallowed by the light, and immediately burst like a rainstorm, and the ground was full of dark red liquid. You can come out now. At the same time, Dustless suddenly took out a miniature doll, which was Nina Yadilak's original body. She quickly rushed into the liquid and quickly absorbed it. Damn it, I'm perfect, and I can't lose to a flawed human. Sage's golden body was shattered by his own move, but he also had the ability to repair it infinitely. His sharp golden eyes were gloomy, and his body turned red. He was so angry that smoke was coming out of his 7 orifices. Go to hell. Then, a blue energy ball popped out, and Dustless said coldly, Wang Su's flash. Boom, boom, boom. Sage's body, which had just recovered, was destroyed again by Dustless's finger, and the golden light scattered over the blue sea. The person who made you is not bad. On the sea surface, the broken pieces of Sage gathered again, and then, under Dustless's gaze, they finally merged into one, and Sage emerged from the water again, safe and sound. Although I can't kill you, but, at this point, Sage's gloomy smile became strange. Similarly, it seems that you can't kill me either. However, if you continue to exhaust me like this, you'll be the unlucky one. I forgot to tell you before, my stamina is also unlimited. The Sage proudly narrated and proudly raised his disgusting head. Idiot. Dustless shook his head speechlessly, and said sarcastically, when you say this, at least look at the situation under your feet, or I'll be very troubled. Under my feet? Sage was stunned when he heard this, and looked at Dustless in confusion. Then, he lowered his head subconsciously, and his huge eyes suddenly froze, and a very bad feeling swept across his heart. Chapter 1587. What the hell is this? The Sage roared in shock, his voice full of fear. He was shocked to find that below him was a black hole similar to the abyss of the universe. He did not know how deep it was, but the Sage knew that if he fell in, he would not be able to get out. I must not be swallowed by this thing. As a perfect being, how can I be swallowed so easily? Absolutely not. I cannot tolerate this situation. The Sage struggled with all his might as he roared like a madman. His golden eyes revealed a trace of fear that penetrated deep into his soul. As a perfect being, how could he die? Absolutely not. Idiot, when did I say I was going to swallow you? You still have some value. Dustless laughed and said, the reason you can still talk like a lunatic is because of my mercy. Otherwise, with the power of God's might, and my eye power, you would have already drifted to the abyss of the universe. You still want me to thank you for your kindness? Sage asked angrily. At the same time, he felt that the black hole's gravitational force was much weaker, and he could move his body freely. Of course not. Shaking his finger, Dustless said coldly, even so, you still have to die, but in a different way. In any case, it can be considered as me reusing trash. Reusing trash? Sage's golden mouth twitched and he shouted, the trash you are talking about is me? This is blasphemy. Swish. 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 The Sage opened his mouth and shot out a powerful ray of light. The silver ray of light went straight for Dustless's face. Boom. 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 The thick light covered Dustless's eyes. In his anger, Sage increased the power of this move to the limit. It was even bigger and looked unavoidable. This kind of trash move again? Out of boredom, Wu Chen raised his arm again, disappear from me. Bang. 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 Dustless slapped down lightly, and the light that was rushing over was sent flying by Dustless. Just like before, it changed its trajectory. Damn you. Sage's eyes widened, and he sadly found that his move was flying toward him again. Boom, boom, boom. Sage was both angry and helpless. Faced with his own attack, he was helpless as well. His entire body was blown to smithereens, turning into a pool of fresh red blood. You can absorb him now. Dustless glanced at the pocket-sized figure and said casually. This person was Nina Dillard. The red liquid on the ground was nourishment for her. Thank you. Nina Yadilak glanced at Dustless gratefully before diving into the red liquid like a fish in water. Her originally pocket-sized body also became slightly larger. With this cycle, she would soon be able to return to her normal appearance. No wonder you didn't kill me. Staring at the gradually growing Nina Yadilad, Sage understood Dustless's evil intentions. This guy was not being merciful, he wanted to squeeze this woman dry. Don't even think about it. The sage roared, an array of light shot towards Nina Yadilad. Isn't it better to just disappear obediently? Why do you have to resist? Dustless shook his head as he turned into a flash of light and appeared in front of Nina Yadilard. Dow Breaker 88, Flying Dragon strikes the thief. A thicker flash of light shot out. Due to the angle, the two beams of light inevitably intertwined. Tear him apart. Looking at the light in Dustless's hand, Sage roared. The light beam shattered in the end, but why can't the perfect me be better than him? The sage gloomily muttered to himself. One of them had been torn apart, but that miserable person wasn't Dustless, it was the perfect him. Boom, boom, boom. The body that had been repaired several times exploded again, turning into a pool of dark red liquid. As time passed, Nina Yadilard gradually recovered. On the other hand, Sage shrunk as he was continuously absorbed. The majestic sage sadly became a worm, and Dustless used God's might to devour him, and that was the end of Sage's life. Time flew by, and in the blink of an eye, 3 days had passed. How boring, Dustless lazily hugged his head as he looked at the distant city through the transparent window of his apartment. He watched TV to pass the time. Akatsuki Koju is dead, Vatler is dead, and the first primogenitor's War King domain has been swept away. All his enemies have been eliminated by Dustless, so naturally, he was bored. This kind of lazy life is quite comfortable, but as time goes on, it is inevitable that he will get bored. Bang! At that moment, there was a sudden explosion. A gust of cold wind invaded the warm room. Dustless looked at the source of the sound and saw Natsuki Minamiya. What's the result? Dustless asked curiously. They all agreed and are willing to obey your orders. Even the Lion King organization has chosen to submit to you. Natsuki gave Dustless a satisfactory answer. The entire Itagami Island is willing to break away from the Japanese government. TSK, I didn't expect you to be so popular. Those stubborn bastards are willing to follow your orders. They are treating you like a king. Just a day ago, Wuchen requested for Itagami Island to become independent and cut off all ties with Japan. Wuchen thought that the Lion King organization would be against it, but who would have thought that they would agree to it? Treating me like a king? Bullshit. They are afraid of being destroyed by me. Dustless sneered. Just as he was about to open his mouth to speak, Nangong Natsuki's sudden words stunned him. Chapter 1588. Let's go on a date, Dustless. Nangong Natsuyu said seriously with narrowed eyes. Date? Dustless pondered over this word for a moment. He was stunned for a few seconds before he caught the faint smile on Natsuki's face. He quickly realized that this was a trap. I refuse. Dustless glanced at Natsuki with a "don't try to fool me" expression. Why would Natsuki want to go on a date with him? Dustless shook his head. The probability was 0. She was not a love-struck fool. She must be plotting something if she wanted to go on a date with him. Are you not a man? Natsuki was stunned for a moment before she became angry. She had already given him enough face by asking him on a date. She did not expect him to refuse. Am I a man or not? Are you sure you want to prove it? Dustless blinked innocently and asked. He then began to take off his clothes. Bastard, what are you doing? Natsuki was shocked. She quickly turned her back to Dustless. Put your clothes on the boat. Hee hee. Dustless laughed dryly. He shrugged and said helplessly, You asked me if I am a man or not. I will take off my clothes to prove it to you. You. Natsuki was furious. She angrily stomped her feet. She turned her head and stared at Dustless. Her eyes were filled with tears. Is there something wrong with Natsuki's head? Seeing this scene, Dustless's face was filled with a strange expression. Looking at the sobbing Nangong Natsuyu, he felt as if his worldview had collapsed. Nangong Natsuyu, this strong woman, was crying? This joke was not funny at all. Cough cough cough. Sorry, I was rude just now. I agree to go on a date with you. Wuchen finally compromised. He glanced at Nangong Na-yu and frowned. At the same time, he wrinkled his nose. He smelled a scent from Nangong Na-yu that he had never smelled before. Strange. Why does she have my scent on her? Staring at Nangong Natsuki, Wu Chen's expression became even more strange. He stared at the girl's dark eyes. They were like the abyss of the universe that attracted his attention. Hey, let's go. Hearing that Wu Chen agreed to go on a date, Nangong Na-yu's face immediately lit up with joy. She quickly pulled Wu Chen's arm and skipped away. She was completely different from the usual Nangong Na-yu, who was inflexible and calm. Really? Are you kidding me? I still want to sleep a little longer. Yawning tiredly, Wu Chen could only change his clothes and go out to play with her. I don't know what's wrong with me today. Inside the elevator, Dustless didn't know whether to laugh or cry as he stared at Nangong Natsuyu. She was like a completely different person. Her personality was the opposite of her usual self. She gave off the feeling of a moody witch. Miss Natsuki, where do you want to go? Looking at the scorching sun on the street, Dustless was dispirited. He wanted to take an afternoon nap under the scorching sun, not to mention going shopping with Natsuki. Let's just walk around. Grabbing Dustless's arm, the girl skipped away. She was extremely happy. But before she could take 2 steps, she was blocked by some ignorant people. Hey, gigolo, let go of my hand. Let me do it. A few figures suddenly appeared from a nearby alley. They reeked of alcohol and made people want to vomit. They had bracelets that represented the demon race. Their strength was definitely not ordinary. If you get out of my way, I can pretend that nothing happened. Dustless expressionlessly glanced at them. He was not interested in these small fries. But Natsuki's stubborn temper flared up. Get down here and kowtow to admit your mistake. Natsuki's face darkened as she coldly warned. Even her eyes were filled with a red light. Otherwise, you will regret it. When did this girl become so arrogant? Dustless stared at Natsuki in astonishment. He chose to remain silent and watch the show. Little girl, are you looking for death? You look quite pretty. Apologize to me and I will let bygones be bygones. The hooligan who suddenly appeared stared at Natsuki's delicate face. His hand was already reaching out to grab her. You're looking for death. Natsuki lifted her small foot and swept it out. The hooligan was sent flying. The force behind the kick was extremely ferocious. Caw caw caw, sounds could be heard. His bones were definitely broken. You broke his bones with a kick. That brat is a demon race. His physique is stronger than normal humans. Natsuki is not a melee fighter. But Dustless was stunned. Bastard, you dare to hit our boss? Everyone, let's teach him a lesson. Several hoodlums were furious. They took out steel pipes, iron rods, and other things and rushed over. They all smashed towards Nangong Na-yu. You guys can kill each other. Natsuki coldly said. She blinked her eyes and the hooligans started to beat each other. Let's go, Chinkuen. Natsuki pulled Dustless's hand to leave but she found that she couldn't pull him away. She turned her head and looked at him in confusion. Dustless was as cold as ice. Mississippi. Although I don't know what happened, you are not Natsuki. The taijutsu you used to break that hooligan's bones was armament hockey. Secondly, it should be genjutsu that controlled them to fight each other. Although I don't know how you did it, I clearly felt the fluctuation of chakra. Please give me a reasonable explanation. Dustless coldly stared at Natsuki. No wonder this girl felt strange. She was completely different from the usual Natsuki. It turned out that she was an imposter. Sure enough, I was seen through. Natsuki shrugged helplessly. Her tone was somewhat mocking. This girl. Wu Chen's mouth twitched. He glared at Nangong Nayu. Her tone was the same as his, tangled. Chapter 1589. The young girl's eyes were filled with ridicule, and a trace of teasing flowed within them. Her cute and exquisite face was suffused with 2 faint blushes, and she was extremely beautiful. In this world, chakra and armament hockey are exclusive to me, and no one has any reason to learn them, so why do you know how to use them? Speaking of this, Dustless paused and said, so please tell me your identity and origin, otherwise, it will be difficult for you to escape from my hands. Phew. As his voice fell, Dustless grabbed the girl's white arm. Let me go. The girl's face was stiff, and her angry look was quite cute and charming. Crystal tears squeezed out of her eyes again, and she looked like she was about to cry. Humph. But this time it obviously didn't work. Dustless just snorted and chose to turn a blind eye. His face was firm, and he wasn't confused by her at all. At the same time, Dustless began to think about the origin of the girl. Koju, that guy seems to have a similar experience as me. Dustless suddenly thought of Koju. Koju's daughter, Koju, also tricked him like this. Could it be, as if he understood something, Dustless's face twitched fiercely, and his calm eyes rolled up stormy waves, and he stared at the girl's eyes in disbelief. This kind of thing can be followed. Koju's daughter ran from the future to the present. If this is the case, it can also perfectly explain the origin of the girl's chakra and armament hockey. After all, Dustless is the only one on this planet who knows armament hockey and chakra, so the identity of the girl is actually on the verge of being revealed. You finally understand. The girl showed an unhappy expression. She seemed to be very dissatisfied that Dustless guessed her identity. Cough. I'm sorry. Dustless blushed, and he let go of the girl's hand and asked awkwardly, what's your name? My name is Natsuki. The girl who looked exactly like Natsuki replied. Good name. Dustless nodded slightly upon hearing this. His previous gloomy mood was swept away. He stared at the girl's crystalline pupils and after hesitating for a while, he asked expectantly, Your father, is it me? When he said this, Dustless looked depressed. After all, he hadn't made any progress with Natsuki Nangong, and they hadn't reached the point of having a child yet. However, Dustless had no choice but to think in that direction due to the strange girl in front of him. Take a guess. The girl named Moonless revealed a sly smile. Let me guess. Dustless rolled his eyes and said angrily, although I don't know how you did it, but I am the only person on this planet who has chakra, and armament hockey is also the same. The answer is obvious, and you and Natsuki look exactly the same. Dustless's face twitched as he sighed inwardly at the impermanence of the world. Tell me, why are you looking for me? My future daughter. Dustless put on a different face, which was completely different from the shameless expression just now. Huh? Daughter? The girl blinked her eyes and said sarcastically, Then I want to ask this father, a father who takes off his clothes in front of his daughter and asks his daughter to verify whether he is a man or not, this kind of guy should go to hell? Dustless opened his mouth and found that he was speechless, and his face was red with shame. Knowing that the girl was indirectly insulting him, he quickly waved his hand to cover up. You don't know, you have to understand that the father didn't do it on purpose, you have to understand him. I'll let you go this time. The girl with delicate appearance put her hands on her hips, and then looked directly at Dustless's eyes, thinking, it's really disappointing. It's a bit different from what I imagined." "Then what did you imagine me to be like?" Dustless calmly asked, and at the same time, his brows were slightly wrinkled, and his eyes were looking at the distant sky, and there was a flash of anger in his eyes. He could feel an evil aura of disaster coming at him at high speed. "At least I won't be a strange uncle who takes off his clothes in front of his daughter." The girl's face was very serious. "Poochie." Dustless vomited blood and glared at her. It seemed that this girl still couldn't get over this and was still thinking about such a trivial matter. "But, to be honest, I'm also very surprised." Staring at the girl's delicate face, Dustless shook his head lightly. Her height and appearance were almost the same as Natsuki Nangong, so it was no wonder that he recognized her wrongly. In fact, if she didn't use chakra, Dustless would still think that this girl was Natsuki Nangong. Roar, 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 roar. At this moment, in the depths of the blue void, a hysterical roar suddenly sounded. Looking up, it was a ferocious-looking evil dragon. Of course, it could also turn into a flying lizard. "Is that why you're here?" Pointing at the evil dragon in the depths of the void, Dustless stroked his chin and said proudly, "Since you can inherit my chakra, you can't be weak. You shouldn't be so weak that you can't even deal with a dragon." Dustless only glanced at the evil dragon, and then ignored it. There was nothing special about it, and there was nothing worthy of his attention. "Of course, there are other things." The girl's face turned serious. "You too." At this moment, an untimely voice suddenly sounded. Dustless turned his head and saw a girl dressed in gothic lowly clothing. Although she was young, her aura was very strong, and there was an inexplicable majesty about her. "Yo, Natsuki." Dustless waved his hand in greeting. He knew that this was the real Natsuki Nangong, and the girl just now was just an imposter. Or rather, she was the daughter of Dustless and Natsuki Nangong, although her arrival was a bit strange. Chapter 1590. Nangong Natua looked at herself, who looked exactly the same as her. Her expression was one of shock. Her delicate little face was filled with astonishment. She was also extremely shocked by the young lady in front of her. You are, however, in some aspects, Natsuki was much more flexible than Dustless. She stared at the girl, and after a while, a wisp of wisdom flashed in her eyes. She seemed to have seen through the girl's identity, and then she fell silent. Cough, cough, cough. Seeing the three of them fall silent, Dustless had no choice but to stand up and cough twice. There was nothing he could do about it. It was inevitable that men would suffer losses sometimes. Roar, 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 roar. Deep in the sky, a ferocious-looking dragon descended from the sky. Its appearance was quite ferocious, and its eyes were filled with killing intent. There was even saliva dripping from its mouth. Even if you overestimate yourself, you should know when to stop. The young girl coldly raised her right hand. Her pale palm contained a trace of destructive power. At the same time, her black eyes that were as deep as onyx also showed a drastic change. A pair of mysterious blue and white eyes appeared in the girl's eyes. Seeing this, Dustless's eyes flashed with surprise, and he muttered to himself, "How surprising, it seems that she inherited the Tensigen from me." Boom, boom, boom. The turbulent repulsive force erupted at full speed, and the explosive impact hit the dragon that was fluttering its wings in the void. Roar, 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 roar. Under the violent impact, the dragon howled in extreme pain and was blasted back dozens of meters. There was a clear dent in its abdomen, and scarlet blood flowed out of its mouth. This attack forced the dragon to retreat again and again. How is the future me? Don't tell me I'm dead. Dustless asked expectantly. After all, Akatsuki Koju's daughter, Akatsuki Koju, came from the future, and at that time, Akatsuki Koju also died because of the Saint Annihilation. Future? You just destroyed this planet. The girl flicked her beautiful black hair and gave an answer that made Natsuki speechless. As expected, it was a mistake to let you live. Natsuki glared at Dustless. There was a hint of blame between her brows, and she was also quite conflicted. She looked at the girl who looked exactly like her with a strange expression. Natsuki felt the connection between their bloodlines, and the technique she used was dustless's. It was obvious what it meant. Thinking of this, Natsuki's face was filled with embarrassment and a rare shyness. Destroying a planet, Dustless pondered. Natsuki's words, but in his eyes, it was normal. After all, this wasn't the only planet that he destroyed. Roar 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 roar. Of Natsuki, and Natsuki. Moreover, it opened its mouth and spat out thick flames at Wu Chen and the others. Boom 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 boom. Natsuki, of Natsuki, and Natsuki. Really, Dustless sighed in the midst of the flames. The golden light was especially dazzling under the cover of the flames. It was golden and resplendent, emitting a holy and warm light. Kensusunu. The girl said the name of the technique. She was very familiar with it. Disappear. Dustless raised his head to look at the sky and indifferently glanced at the black evil dragon. Then, his eye energy spun rapidly. A strand of black flame instantly consumed the black evil dragon. Tensho. The giant dragon's huge fat body was instantly annihilated by the flames. It was pulled into the boundless sea of fire, and the black netherworld fire swallowed it up along with its bones. Ao ao ao. The evil dragon screamed in pain until it finally choked and disappeared. As expected of my dad. Seeing this, the girl gave Dustless a thumbs up. Her face was full of praise and a smile, as if she was saying, "I'm not as good as you. This little girl can't be an imposter, right?" Dustless was speechless. He subconsciously looked at Nangong Natsuki. She also had an expression that said, "This has nothing to do with me." However, this girl who looked exactly like Nangong Natsuki had a normal expression. "I have something to tell you." At this moment, the girl suddenly moved closer to Dustless and said, "If you want to leave this world in the future, remember to bring everyone with you." Everyone? Hearing this, Dustless was stunned. He blurted out, "Are you talking about Azurewing and the others? Who else do you think I'm talking about? You don't seem to know anyone else in this world, right?" The girl rolled her eyes and asked, "This planet will be destroyed in the future. I'm sure you know what this means." Dustless nodded slightly. If the planet was destroyed, it meant that all living things would wither away. Every blade of grass and tree on this planet would vanish completely. That's a must. He nodded resolutely. It would be fine if this planet was safe and sound. If it was destroyed, then he could only bring them away. As for the reason, Dustless didn't ask. There was no decisive future. Everything was changed by human factors. Aren't you curious about how this planet will be destroyed? The girl was somewhat depressed. Dustless's reaction to such shocking news was actually mediocre. He was even indifferent. She was quite disappointed. Who knows? Dustless shrugged and said, "The future is also unreliable. In fact, the moment you appeared, the future changed. That so-called reason will also change." In the original work, Koju's daughter, Koju, used this method to change the ending of Koju's death. Thus, it didn't matter what the future was like. It would change anyway. My journey in this world is about to come to an end. Looking up at the sky, Dustless's lazy eyes were filled with expectation. Chapter 1591. Inside the system world. The sky was clear and cloudless. White clouds floated lazily in the sky. The green mountains and clear waters were the only real world in this world. TSK, the black-haired young man sighed under the shade of a tree. A woman's thoughts can't be easily guessed. Really, compared to Itagami Island, the system world was more comprehensive. The scenery was more beautiful and the climate was more suitable for human habitation. At first, Wu Chen thought that if he brought Nangong Na Yu and the others away, they would fiercely object. Wu Chen had even prepared an illusion. However, the world was unpredictable. When the girls heard that they were going to play in another world, they agreed without hesitation. Before leaving, Dustless once again destroyed the world of bloodthirsty frenzy. You are really greedy. Heir, the incarnation of the system consciousness, frowned. When he left, Dustless used one of the strongest illusions, the infinite Tsukuyomi, to kill the whole world and used the descent of the divine tree world to absorb everyone's vitality. Every time he left, Wu Chen would do this to enhance his strength. Although the means were a bit evil, Wu Chen, who was used to doing bad things, also kept calm. So what? This is a world where the strong prey on the weak. Being weak is a sin. Dustless smiled perfunctorily and said, everything ends here. Now, we can change to the next world. This is good too. I can use infinite Tsukuyomi and divine tree world descent to absorb the world. My strength will increase too. I hope I can go to a world with a high level of power. Dustless prayed. Ling couldn't control this kind of thing. In fact, it was randomly chosen. Where to go depended entirely on Dustless's personal luck. Kacha. Ling's seemingly weak arm gently tore apart the void, and a shocking black hole appeared. No, it was more accurate to say that it was a spatial tunnel. How violent. Wu Chen shook his head and glanced at her calmly. Then, he plunged into the cave. In a strange world, the weather was clear and very hot. However, Wu Chen's first impression was that it was very cold. He subconsciously opened his eyes and saw the world in the water. F***CK. Why is she so good at picking a place? Next time, she might as well put me in lava. Wu Chen opened his mouth and scolded loudly. Suddenly, a large amount of lake water invaded his lungs. He tried to mobilize his strength, but he helplessly discovered that perhaps because he had just crossed over, his body was soft and had no strength at all. Splash. At the same time, a huge wave came from the lake. Dustless looked for the source. An unexpected figure appeared in front of him. She had aqua blue hair and aqua blue eyes. Even her eyebrows were aqua blue. Her fair face was as delicate as mutton fat jade. Her bright eyes were full of vigor as she pounced on Wu Chen. Her figure was exceptionally hot. She was wearing a pure white tight-fitting uniform. Her curvaceous figure was particularly eye-catching. This girl is so familiar, Dustless whispered to himself. He secretly searched for the joy of the person. Suddenly, he thought of an almost identical figure. His body suddenly felt cold. Is death? Bad luck. Why did I meet this evil star? First, I fell into the water. Now, I inexplicably became the prey of this woman. Dustless felt cold. He had goosebumps all over his body. Isdeath was a famous sadist. Her greatest interest was to torture others. Although Dustless had no grudges with her, this girl came to save him inexplicably. It showed that there was an unknown relationship. In short, Dustless was in the sight of Isdeath. Don't run. There was a faint voice from the bottom of the water. Dustless looked up. It turned out to be Isdeath, who was close at hand. This girl was strong and good at swimming. She caught Dustless almost instantly. She held him in her arms and then rushed to the surface of the water. Although I don't know what happened, I can be sure that she is looking for me for absolutely no good thing. Dustless's expression was full of depression. Just at that moment, he keenly caught the coldness in Isdeath's eyes. Plop. In an instant, Isdeath took Dustless out of the water, jumped to the shore very vigorously, and threw Dustless on the ground. She pointed at Dustless and said, "You want to die before I torture you? Dream on. I still have countless kinds of torture to try. This time, I will try it on your body." Ha! Hearing this, Dustless was suddenly dumbfounded and asked with a speechless face, "That? Although I am very grateful to you for saving me, did you get the wrong person?" "Miss, I don't know you." Dustless was confused by this sudden change. He just crossed into this world and did not offend Esteth. It was too sad to be a scapegoat for no reason. By the way, there seemed to be a body under the sea just now. That guy looked a little like me. Did Esteth make a mistake? Dustless bowed his head and thought carefully about the development of the matter. Soon, he found a big problem. He stared at Esteth speechlessly. It was estimated that this girl had mistaken him for someone else. I saw a person who looked 70% like me at the bottom of the sea. The guy you said may be dead. If you don't believe me, you can have a look. Chapter 1592. However, these words had no effect. Esteth just stared at Dustless coldly. Her cold pupils did not change at all. She just stared at him quietly. More and more coldness and killing intent flowed from her body. 3 beasts. After a moment of silence, Esteth called the names of the 3 subordinates. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. 3 black shadows appeared behind her in an instant. They were wearing the same clothes, and they all knelt on one knee very respectfully. They looked at Esteth with a look of worship and fanaticism. It was as if they saw God. This guy said that he was not the prince. Torture him well, let him admit it, and then let him die in pain. How dare he say that I mistook him for someone else? Esteth turned her head and left. She sat on the chair prepared in advance and watched quietly. It seemed that Dustless was not qualified for her to do anything. Prince? Dustless heard the words and his eyes flashed with surprise. After a few seconds of contemplation, he was enlightened. He secretly guessed, I'm afraid that Esteth thought I was the bullshit prince. Unfortunately, that guy is dead. Dustless could be 100% sure that the body in the deepest part of the river was the prince's. He was not the prince, but his appearance was somewhat similar. He was afraid that Esteth had mistaken him for someone else. Your Royal Highness, I'm sorry. This is the order of the minister. Who asked you to do the right thing? As a result, the minister was forced to ask Esteth for help and asked us to kill you secretly. You have to understand that we are still fighting with the alien race. For you, Esteth secretly came back. Your Royal Highness really deserves to die. The blonde kid squatted and looked at Dustless. His face was full of ridicule and murderous intent. This guy seems to be called Nyo. Glancing at him faintly, Dustless's mind waned. After a while, his strength had recovered 80 to 90%. Now his whole body was full of strength. Esteth. This guy doesn't seem to be the prince. The silver-haired middle-aged man bowed and respectfully said to Esteth, they wear different clothes and are different in age. I have seen the prince before, and this guy should be 2 different people. We can barely be considered acquaintances. Dustless glanced at the middle-aged man in surprise. He was also quite familiar with him. This man was called Leva, who used to be Bulat's former boss, the former general of the empire who was both wise and brave. He was framed and arrested because he refused to bribe. Later, he was rescued by Esteth and had been loyal to her ever since. Is that so? Hearing this, Esteth nodded slightly and looked at Dustless quietly. She asked, did you see other people's bodies under the riverbed? Tell me the exact location, and I'll let you go if you're right. Let me go? Dustless frowned. Esteth seemed to be too proud. Obviously, she caught the wrong person, but she didn't apologize. Now she said that she would let him go. She was too arrogant. I'm sorry. Dustless turned his head and did not look at Esteth. He said loudly, I am forgetful. You are threatening me again. I suddenly forgot the place where the guy died. The tone of this guy's words, the 3 beasts heard the words and their mouths were twitching wildly. They stared at Dustless with horrified eyes. Their big eyes seemed to be about to fall out, which gave people a very shocking feeling. The dull eyes were obviously saying, if you want to die, just say it. There is no need to be tortured to death by Esteth. You guy, not only the three beasts were stunned, but his death was also full of astonishment. Her eyes were dull and empty, gray, and lost the shrewd brilliance of the past. Interesting. Esteth, who came back to her senses, had a strange light in her beautiful eyes. She looked at Dustless curiously and asked calmly, "Are you forgetful? Do you need me to help you think?" "Really?" Dustless was surprised when he heard the words. He quickly opened his mouth and pointed to the depths of his throat and said, "If it's possible, thank you very much. I just drank a big mouthful of seawater. Now, please help me suck it all out with artificial respiration. After that, I will take you to find the body of the prince." Ha ha ha. After Dustless said this, there was a sound of gnashing teeth. Looking at the source of the sound, what came into view was a ferocious-looking brat. "Nyo. What did you say? I didn't hear it clearly. Say it again if you have the guts." Nyo was full of anger, and his eyes were fixed on Dustless. His sharp eyes seemed to be looking for a suitable place to cut open Dustless's stomach. Catching the raging coldness in the depths of Nyo's eyes, Dustless sneered and shouted, "Are you an idiot? I will let that woman give me artificial respiration and suck the water out of my stomach. If you understand, get out of my way, you little retard. You are looking for death." The golden-haired brat was so irritated that he almost vomited blood. At that moment, he attacked with his immature fist. This weak fist seemed to be extremely fragile, but it was definitely enough to easily smash human bones. For the three beasts trio, Esteth was a godlike existence. She was even bigger than the emperor of this country. Now Dustless actually let their idol do artificial respiration. How could they tolerate it? "You don't know how to live." His eyelids twitched slightly, and a surge of energy broke out of his body. The irresistible repulsive force suddenly repelled him. Shinra Tensei. Bang bang bang. The brat who was caught off guard was immediately sent flying, rolling and crawling more than 10 meters away. Only then did he lie on the ground awkwardly. His head was close to the ground, and his buttocks were high up. It was extremely funny. Chapter 1593. Nu, Leva and Didos stared at Nu, who was embarrassed, their eyes widened in disbelief. Their expressions were extremely exaggerated as they locked on Dustless, who was standing still. Their heads were a little dizzy. "Pa. It hurts." Didos slapped himself. The burning pain made him understand that this was not a dream. "This is... How did he do it? Taigu?" Estetha's watery eyes also flashed with a strong surprise. The moment just now happened too fast. Everything was just a flash of lightning. She had no extra time to react. When she realized it, Nu had already been blown away. "I can be sure now that you are not the prince." Esteth sat elegantly on the chair and crossed her legs very lazily. "The prince that the minister told me is just an ordinary political enemy. He has no strength and is just an ordinary human. Although Nu's strength is ordinary, she can definitely beat an ordinary human, so you should not be the prince." "Is it?" Dustless heard the words and wiped the sweat stains, then patted off the dust on his body. There was a hot temperature in his body. After the wet clothes were dried, he whispered, "Since this is the case, then it is a misunderstanding. Goodbye." "Wait," the elegant voice came again. Dustless turned his head to look. It was Esteth who was smiling. "Anything else?" Wu Chen asked. He felt a cold and gloomy aura locking onto him, as if he was being stared at by a hungry beast. The high-density evil spirit could even make people have the illusion that they were drowning in a sea of blood. However, Dustless maintained shock from start to finish and was not affected. "This guy can ignore my murderous spirit?" There were ripples in the calm eyes. Estetha's bored expression gradually became interested. "But you hit my subordinates, don't you think you should apologize?" "Apologize? You want me to apologize?" Dustless heard the words and sneered. "I can tell you, not to mention your subordinates. Even if I hit you, do you want me to apologize? Don't even think about it. Reckless fool." Leva and Didos looked at each other angrily. They looked at each other and attacked from different directions. They were all strong people who followed Esteth to fight. Although they were not strong enough to fight 100 people, at least 1 against 10 was absolutely no problem. You bugs, Silver frowned slightly, and some hostility flashed through his eyes. He revealed his scarlet 3-tomo Sharingan, and then glanced at the 2 people attacking him with his deep Sharingan. Plop. The 2 of them were severely injured in an instant. They fell to the ground with pale faces. Wuchen didn't even move his hands. Esteth was surprised when she saw this, and she immediately asked, Leva, Didos. You 2 are getting more and more useless. There's no need to scold the 2 of them. That's because you'll end up the same way if you run into me. In fact, I don't even need to do anything. I can easily deal with you. The scarlet 3-tomo Sharingan stared at Esteth. Dustless said calmly, so, please don't humiliate yourself. Madam Esteth, at this time, Leva's voice sounded with difficulty. He stared at Dustless's eyes with fear and said in horror, this guy is not an ordinary human being. His eyes are very strange. It seems to be something like illusion, but it's very real. Is his consciousness still awake? Staring at Leva with surprise, Dustless was quite surprised. He immediately looked at his right hand that was already bloody and nodded, this guy is very decisive. He uses pain to get rid of the illusion. He has rich fighting experience. Are you also a person with Taigu ability? Looking at Dustless's eyes, Esteth was confused. She did not remember that there was such a Taigu as eyes. The 48 Taigu of the Empire had accurate records. This ability had never been heard of. Taigu? I don't need that ability. It's superfluous for me. Dustless shook his head, then he turned and left regardless of Esteth's idea. What kind of place is this? Dustless looked around and found that there were mountains around. There was no one. It was estimated that it was a very remote place. He could not help but curse in his mind. Why do I encounter this annoying trifling thing every time I travel? Wuchen smiled bitterly. He didn't have the slightest connection with that deceitful prince, and they didn't have any relationship. It was just that their appearances were somewhat similar. Whoosh! At this time, it suddenly snowed in the sunny day. The sunlight could be reflected under the sunshine. Looking carefully, a large number of ice dregs were swept up in the sky, followed by the cold wind as expected. The footsteps stopped. Dustless looked at the empty space in front of him. Even if she did not turn her head to look deliberately, she knew that Esteth was coming. It seemed that she did not intend to let Dustless leave. I am very curious about your ability. Stay and be my subordinate. No matter what your identity is, I can let you get glory and wealth, gold and treasures. There are only things you can't think of, but nothing you can't get. Esteth raised her voice and tempted. In this era where people's lives were as cheap as grass, it was lucky to be able to have a full meal. She believed that Dustless would give up the darkness for the light. Be your subordinate? It sounds good. Turning his head and looking at Esteth, Dustless joked, if you can send me to the position of the Emperor, I can barely be your subordinate. You are looking for death. Esteth was as cold as frost. The murderous intent that had been accumulated for a long time burst out, freezing the flowers and trees around. A layer of ice on the ground suddenly attacked Dustless, trying to turn him into a crystal ice sculpture. I may be your natural enemy. You are good at using ice, and I am good at playing with fire. Fate is really cruel. Chapter 1594. Esteth was surprised and stared at Dustless. She did not expect him to say that. She said bluntly, although I don't know what you are talking about, but, you are right, fire can extinguish water, but the same water can also extinguish fire, and I still feel that I am better than a little kid. Phew. When the voice fell, a blue streamer came to his face. He could vaguely catch the long blue hair. There was no doubt that this person was Esteth. Esteth is really a battle maniac. Witnessing Esteth's eyes when she saw the prey, her face was as excited as if she was injected with chicken blood. It gave people the feeling that she found a suitable toy. But your name is really annoying. When it comes to age, I am qualified to be your ancestor. Because of the reason of being a Jubi, Dustless got eternal youth, as well as an immortal life. He would never be old, so his age had always been about 17 or 18 years old. Let me show you something. Catan, he had not used these ordinary ninjutsu for many years. Although Dustless's technique was also a lot rusty, when his death was about to rush, he still threw out a dragon head with a strong momentum. Great Fire Dragon Technique, the dragon head, which was completely composed of flames, roared out and went straight to his death. This kind of trick is useless. The gem-like gorgeous eyes flashed with admiration, and immediately Esteth snapped her fingers. A huge ice wall condensed in front of her, protecting Esteth like a shield. Bang bang bang. Although the fire dragon condensed by flames penetrated the ice layer, this large piece of ice was 1 meter thick, and it did not completely penetrate. It was still a few centimeters thick from Estetha's body. This guy's ability to play with ice is good. If I can give Akiji's ice fruit to her, Estetha's strength will inevitably be better, but unfortunately. Taigu is always a Taigu. Dustless shook his head. Although Taigu was good, its power was limited. It was not as comprehensive as the devil fruit, and the density of the ice made by Akiji was higher than that of Esteth, and the hardness was higher. Kakaka. Esteth waved her sword and smashed the ice in front of her. Then she turned into a storm and the cold light swept towards Dustless's head. Your speed is very fast. For a human like you to be able to do this is already a miracle. Dustless nodded slightly, glanced at the incoming blade and ignored it with a smile. He simply stood still and deliberately showed a flaw to Esteth. Humph, are you looking down on me? Estetha's delicate face became colder when she saw this, and the strength of her sword increased by 3 points. Originally, she planned to catch Dustless alive and teach this arrogant boy a good lesson. She did not expect that Dustless was not sensible enough, and now he even dared to push his luck. Poochie. The ice sword cut through Dustless's head and cut it into pieces. Why isn't it bleeding? She looked at Dustless with surprise, but what made Esteth depressed was that Dustless did not move and was not injured. She stared straight at Dustless's wound, the place that should be bloody just had a faint golden light. Then it was perfectly repaired, Dustless had nothing to do with it. You can't even hit my body, do you understand now who is the natural enemy of whom? When the voice fell, Dustless rose into the air, the flash between his legs was diffused, the golden light covered it, and he immediately aimed at Estetha's cheek and kicked. Light speed kick. Estetha's pupils shrank, and she quickly blocked with her arms in front of her. At the same time, she gently waved her hand, and the transparent ice shield appeared again in front of her, like a wall in front of Esteth. Kakaka. However, with a crisp sound, the shield condensed by Esteth collapsed in an instant, and the huge flash was all greeted by Esteth. Boom boom boom. The flash did not explode, but turned into a strong impact, and all fell on Estetha's arms. Phew 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 phew. Esteth, who had never been attacked by such a majestic force, looked pale, and she was kicked 20 or 30 meters away by Dustless like a gust of wind. This guy. Estetha's face was extremely gloomy, her arms trembled uncontrollably, this seemingly ordinary kick almost broke her bones. I can be sure that there is no prop like Taigu, but how did this guy do it? Does a human have such a great power? Don't be kidding. Even the super dangerous species can't do this. Esteth touched her numb right arm, and after taking a closer look, she found that there was no scar left on her white wrist. If I didn't work hard to improve my strength in recent years, I am afraid that I would be killed by that kick. Thinking of this, Estetha's face was more heavy and nervous, and even had a hint of depression and vigilance, which had never appeared before. Don't worry. Looking at Esteth who touched her wrist, Dustless waved his hand and said, I have reduced the power of the light speed kick as much as possible, the power will not hurt you. Anyway, you just saved me from the water. Although you're subordinates and you are arrogant, I am not the kind of person who likes to kill. You. Estetha's mouth twitched a few times after hearing the words, and she lowered her voice and asked hoarsely, "Did you deliberately let me win? What do you think?" Dustless seriously spread out his hands and asked calmly, "Do you think you are my opponent? Did you just use your own strength to kick me? With your current level, that's impossible. Also, didn't I just say that I'm your natural enemy?" Chapter 1595. Estetha's arms continued to tremble. She looked at Dustless with difficulty. Perhaps because of her natural belligerence, instead of flinching, the corners of her mouth were raised high, showing a charming arc. This girl deserves to be the queen of sadism. She can still smile when encountering an enemy that she can't defeat. Dustless was speechless. He stared at Estetha with some entanglement. If it was an ordinary person, he would have been thinking about how to escape. Whoosh! A row of ice dregs was shot head-on. The momentum was like a sharp blade. The number was so large that he couldn't deal with it. Especially the front end of the icicle was jumping with piercing cold light. It may even pierce through the bones. Let me enjoy the fun of fighting. Leaving such a sentence, Estetha followed the icicle and swooped down. I don't have extra time to play with you. It's more suitable to find a place to fill my stomach. Fighting. Avoid it as much as possible. Dustless looked up at the ice dregs that came head-on and moved his fingers gently. Fire release, grand fire annihilation. The sea of fire with a diameter of tens of meters roared out. The red fire rolled toward Estetha, and the ice dregs were evaporated in the blink of an eye. This guy, Estetha's beautiful gem-like eyes widened, and her mood was a little heavy. To be honest, witnessing the overwhelming flame attack, she was shocked and speechless. No wonder he dares to say that he is my natural enemy. Estetha's white face was cautious. She immediately stepped on the ground with her feet. Her body ignored the existence of gravity for a moment and flew into the air. Clap, clap, clap. Snapping his fingers a few times in a row, several huge ice meteorites fell from the sky. Flame and ice were two diametrically opposite existences. The moment the ice meteorites appeared, the flame evaporated them, but the moderation of the ice also played a role in cooling down. The sea of fire that was originally monstrous also weakened a lot. Seize this opportunity. Estetha, who was staring at Dustless, rushed to Dustless like lightning. Seeing his careless face, as if he was dealing with a passerby, Estetha was furious. This guy really looked down on people too much. Split into two. The ice sword in her hand fell down horizontally, and the cold light went straight to Dustless's head. Estetha smiled in surprise, and her happy face seemed to find Silver's tragic death. However, in the next second, she realized that she was very wrong. Clang! Clang! The ice sword was not as sharp as expected, but it was unusually slow and ordinary. Looking closely, the cold light was directly caught by Dustless with one hand. Immediately, he exerted a little force, and Estetha's ice sword made a ka-ka sound. Estetha's self-esteem collapsed instantly like this cracking sound. Damn it! Seeing this, Estetha did not admit defeat. Instead, she waved her hand, and dense ice swords came to him. You still can't give up. Dustless shook his head. He thought that Estetha would give up after a little blow. He did not expect that the gap between her consciousness and Dustless's made her not give up, but she became braver and braver. She wanted to die together with Dustless. Sorry, I've had enough. Looking cold, Dustless's pupils turned faster, and a black flame seemed to swallow the world. Amaterasu. The black flame was like a black hole. It was born out of nothing. It swallowed all the ice cones that came to him, and even the most basic residue was not left. You want to go? At least leave something for me. Estetha was fierce, and she broke out a fierce aura. Her blue hair stood up, and the area within dozens of meters was instantly turned into ice sculptures. Estetha made up her mind and shouted, Mokbotemo. The void was frozen at this moment, and everything stopped. Everything in Estetha's eyes was petrified and could no longer move. Thank you for pleasing me for so long. Since I got the Taigu, you are the first one who forced me to use this trick. Walking to the front of Dustless, Esteth grabbed his chin, and the ice sword in her hand stabbed out. A huge bloody hole suddenly appeared in Dustless's body. It's over. Esteth wiped her sweat tiredly. After a few seconds, the time of her unique skill was also over. Looking at the body on the ground, when she was planning to bury it, she was suddenly dumbfounded. What is this situation? Looking at the wood on the ground, Esteth's tone increased several times. The body that was pierced by herself suddenly became a pierced wood, genjutsu. This is genjutsu. Dustless's lazy tone came out from another direction, and he walked to Esteth with a chuckle. He said, your strength is good, but your spiritual power is not good. Genjutsu? Esteth's face was stiff when she heard the words. She resisted the depression in her heart and asked loudly, when did it start? Why didn't I notice it? There is no need to answer this question. When you saw my Sharingan, it started. Dustless explained, and one of his hands had been inserted into Esteth's clothes. Get your claws off me. Esteth noticed the big hand in her arms, and she couldn't help but be furious. She wanted to kick Dustless away, but she found that her body was as weak as if it was emptied. She had no extra strength to deal with Dustless. The big move just now had already been hit by Dustless's genjutsu, and it consumed all the strength of Esteth. Found it. At this time, Dustless's eyes brightened, and the big hand in Esteth's arms was also taken out. Of course, there was also Esteth's own banknotes. No matter who you are, you need enough money. Goodbye, Miss Esteth. By the way, let me introduce myself. My name is Wu Chen, not the prince you are talking about. Dustless explained while looking for the wallet, and his back gradually disappeared in Esteth's beautiful eyes. Chapter 1596. Esteth's cold eyes were dotted with hostility, and she had an unlucky expression. It was the first time for her to be robbed, and she played the role of the victim. Dustless. Let's wait and see. She slammed the ground with all her strength, ignoring the weakness of her body. Esteth gathered her strength and stood up. Dustless, the strongest enemy she had ever met in her life, was right in front of her. How could she lie on the ground like a coward? But as soon as she stood up straight, Esteth helplessly found that her body seemed to be carrying a mountain. She had to bow again and it was difficult to move. At this moment, even a worm could run faster than her. Lady Esteth, at the same time, the three beasts also woke up from their coma. They looked at each other and quietly examined Esteth, who was in a cold sweat. Their mouths squirmed slightly. Needless to say, they knew the final result. Esteth lost. Damn, is that guy so strong? He is obviously just a 17 or 18-year-old boy toy. The three beasts were secretly angry. They didn't expect Dustless to be so abnormal that he could defeat the strongest in the Empire and even the strongest in the world, the sadist General Esteth. You guys strengthen your training for me. I have a hunch that I will meet him again. Esteth ordered coldly. There was not much disappointment on her face. Instead, she was a little happy. Dustless's sudden rise made her boring life have some entertainment additives, which was a blessing in disguise. Boom, boom, boom. The violent roar resounded through the world, and a huge fire burned in the air. Are all the people in this godforsaken place dangerous? Turning his head and looking at the mountain of corpses and blood behind him, Dustless frowned. In less than half an hour, he had crushed hundreds of dangerous species. Even several super dangerous species passing by during the period were killed by him. The direction of the imperial capital should be there. Looking up at the super large city in front of him, Dustless's eyes extended to the limit, and the scene dozens of kilometers away could be seen at a glance. A sizable city appeared in Dustless's eyes. There was no doubt that it was the so-called imperial capital. About another half an hour later, Wu Chen had just arrived at this decaying city. He found that countless people were staring at him with panicked eyes. They immediately fled for fear of not being able to avoid him. What's going on? I'm not a malefic star. Also, what's with this situation? Do I need to be this unlucky? Dustless complained gloomily. Looking at the figures in front of him, he dashed forward and grabbed one of them. He grabbed the yellow-haired, yellow-faced middle-aged man and asked, "Why did you run when you met me? Give me a reasonable explanation, or I can guarantee that you will be torn into pieces in the next second." As his voice fell, Dustless slightly released his killing intent. The man's face instantly turned pale, and he stared at Dustless in fear. He pointed at the notice board not far away, which was full of wanted posters, and said timidly, "You are wanted." "I see." Dustless heard the words and let go of the middle-aged man in his hand, and immediately walked slowly to the notice board. It was a wanted poster. After a few glances, Dustless found a young man who looked quite similar to himself. "This is the bad prince that is death," said. Dustless frowned, and he felt that he was shot even though he was lying down. This person was similar to himself in appearance. "Let's find a place to eat first." Glancing at the wanted poster next to him, Dustless turned his head and left. His observation hockey spread out and soon found a suitable restaurant. However, Dustless just walked in and scared away a group of people like a jinx. What made him most speechless was that even the boss fled with him. Boom! Immediately after, Wu Chen, who was listening in all directions, realized that there was an uninvited guest. A large number of soldiers scrambled to catch him. Their ferocious appearance was extremely angry. "You are a wanted criminal, and you dare to wander under our eyes. Do you need to be so unscrupulous? You are too arrogant. Are you sure it's him?" At the same time, several obscure figures were hiding in the dark alley, staring at Dustless. These people were like dark creatures that couldn't be seen. They were all wearing black robes, as if they couldn't be exposed to the light. From the wanted poster, it should be him, but no one knows whether it is him or not. After all, no one has seen him, and all his guards are dead. Taking a closer look, these people dressed in black robes were none other than the famous assassination organization of the imperial capital, Night Raid. But does an imperial prince have anything to do with us? The young man with green hair asked, and there was a hint of rejection in his words. Although the other members didn't say much, their eyes were a little sad. Who? This is a long story. As the boss, Najenda explained, this prince is actually the real heir to the emperor, but he was pulled down by the minister. Now he is still being chased. If we can get him to join our revolutionary army, it will be of great help in the future. Can you understand what I mean? Najenda continued, this prince is very important to us. If his news is exposed, we can attack the empire from public opinion, and our revolution will have more advantages. Then let's do it. I will personally bury those rotten soldiers. The black-haired beautiful girl with a katana said calmly, and her eyes were cold. When the entire Night Raid team was about to attack, they quickly found that they were doing something unnecessary, and others didn't need help at all. Chapter 1597. Dustless stared at the soldiers who swarmed over. If possible, he didn't want to attack ordinary humans, but the premise was that they didn't provoke him. Get out of my way. Looking around at the soldiers who surrounded him, Dustless said coldly, you'd better get out of my way before I get angry, otherwise you. However, there were too many self-righteous people in this world. Before Dustless finished his words, this group of people rushed to shout. Bastard, it's just a wanted person, how dare he be so arrogant? Catch this guy and beat him up. Teach him a lesson. Before Dustless finished speaking, the tide-like voices covered Dustless's voice. These idiots pointed at Dustless and scolded him. In their opinion, this guy was a dead man. How could a person who was targeted by Minister Ernest still be alive? It's hard to negotiate. The light in his hand floated. Dustless turned into a flash of light and rushed in like thunder. He was not an indecisive person. Since he gave this group of people a way to live, then they should all die. Poochie. 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 With a wave of his arm, light flickered. With every swing of his blade, countless people were chopped to pieces. A one-sided massacre began mercilessly. Shoot! Someone screamed with a sharp voice, full of fear. Damn, this guy was too scary. He looked harmless on the surface, but according to the current one-sided situation, he was simply a living killing machine. F***ck, a person could be cut into two halves with a casual slash. This was the complete opposite of the weak prince in the intelligence reports. Cough cough cough. At this moment, the people of the night raid were also shocked, especially Scarlet Pupil, who planned to take Dustless away. She was a little dizzy and looked at Negenda subconsciously. Not only Scarlet Pupil, but other members of the night raid also had the same look. The puzzled look was obviously saying, "Is this a person who is being hunted? Are you sure it's that prince?" Everyone, wait a minute. Negenda was embarrassed by the crowd, and at the same time, she stared at Dustless in confusion. This decisive killing and good strength were not what the prince had. No matter what, let's take him away first. Negenda broke out her aura and immediately led the members of the night raid to the place where Dustless was located. It had become hell on earth. The sharpness of the heavenly sword of gathering clouds was too terrifying, and Dustless's strength was too great, to the point that everyone was split in half. What do you guys think of this guy's skills? Negenda suddenly asked. The guy killed so many Imperial soldiers, which is equivalent to completely offending the Empire. Even if he is not the prince, he can also be a member of our night raid. Very strong. Bullet gave a thumbs up and praised, "I'm sure he's better than me. He slaughtered them so cleanly and without any hesitation. He treated the old, the weak, the sick, and the disabled equally. If he wants to be an assassin, he's definitely qualified." "I can feel that he's very strong," Leona chimed in. "Humph, although it's good, it's not as good as my Taigu." Mine snorted proudly. "It's very clean, and his strength is also very strong." Akame nodded. She was also a master of using the sword. Dustless did not have any gorgeous swordsmanship, it was just the purest strength. "That is to say, you all think he is very suitable?" Negenda showed a satisfied smile. She also thought that Dustless was good, and now he still had a grudge with the Empire, which also meant that it was impossible to stand on the side of the Empire in the future. For a character like Dustless, if he joined the Empire army, he would definitely be a terrible character like his death in the future, then the Revolutionary Army would have to pay a heavy price to deal with him. At the same time, Dustless also discovered the people of the night raid early. In fact, when they hid, Dustless saw the movements of several people. No murderous intent, staring at several people who came, Dustless did not feel the cold temperament of murderous intent, and he was too lazy to entangle. When he was about to turn and leave, Negenda stopped him. The voice in her mouth stopped abruptly, and Negenda didn't know how to call him. "My name is Dustless." Glancing at Negenda, Dustless replied faintly, "What's the matter?" "I don't seem to have anything to do with your night raid, and I'm not rich." The people of the night raid looked at each other when they heard the words. Their targets seemed to be those corrupt local tyrants, so many people regarded them as robbers. "Are you the Emperor of the Empire?" "I'm not a prince, sorry, you found the wrong person." Interrupted impatiently, Dustless was depressed. The feeling of being attacked while lying down was really not good. Inexplicably, there were a bunch of enemies, anyone would feel depressed. "Is it?" Negenda was not surprised when she heard the words. The information she got said that the prince was weak, and there were even rumors that he was dead. "Then, I hope you can become a member of the night raid, and work together for this country, I promise you." Without waiting for Negenda to finish speaking, Dustless didn't even think about it and directly agreed. He didn't even have a place to stay now. It was a good choice to join the night raid temporarily. What's more, he had become a wanted criminal. Since this city couldn't accommodate him, then he just needed to turn the city upside down and change the dynasty. So straightforward. Not only the members of the night raid were stunned, but Negenda was also stunned. She thought that Dustless would deliberately refuse, but she didn't expect this guy to agree so easily. Chapter 1598. So straightforward. Not only were the members of the night raid in a daze, but Najenda was also stunned. She thought that Dustless would deliberately refuse, but who knew that this guy agreed so casually? The members of the night raid were full of doubts. This was too fake. He joined the night raid without any hesitation. Did their boss's charm index increase? That's not right. Even if my charm index increased, it would be me. How could it be the boss? Leonai whispered, and Najenda happened to hear it clearly. She immediately glared at her fiercely. What's your purpose? Najenda asked cautiously. Although she didn't believe that Dustless was a spy, there were some necessary situations that must be clarified. Assassins had their own rules, especially the Night Raid, which was not an ordinary assassin organization. They were a serious revolutionary army, and the identity of the members must be clear. Purpose? Hearing this, Wu Chen was stunned. He really didn't have any purpose. He subconsciously raised his head and looked at the huge palace. I don't have any great purpose or goal. However, if I have to find a purpose, it's there. Pointing at the beautiful palace, Dustless said coldly, inexplicably wanted me, it's unforgivable. The members of the night raid looked at each other in dismay. Although it was hard for them to accept Wu Chen, this weirdo, they could barely understand. Just because his appearance was close to that prince, he was wanted, and they even indiscriminately sent people to kill him. If this happened to anyone, it would be hard for them to accept. It was also understandable that he could take revenge on the empire or the ministers. Quick, don't let those people escape. At this moment, there was a sound of hurried footsteps, and a large number of people ran at the same time. The ground shook slightly, and groups of soldiers rushed like hungry wolves. The mission is completed, everyone retreat. Najenda didn't choose to stay. After all, this was the imperial capital, the enemy's nest. No matter how they fought, they would lose in the end. The outskirts of the empire were filled with beautiful scenery. 3 days later, at the base of the night raid. At this moment, Najenda, as the boss, was sitting in her own position. She spat out her eyes comfortably and held a piece of paper full of information in her hand. After 3 days, the members of Night Raid had accepted Dustless as an intruder. What's done can't be undone. They had no choice but to accept the boss's orders. Furthermore, Dustless's strength was not bad. It was impossible for him to drag them down. He was also very strong. He had even given pointers to Leo, Scarlet Eye, and the others. Therefore, everyone was quite fond of Dustless. Only Lubbock wanted to cry but had no tears. Everyone was curious about Dustless, a newcomer, so he was inevitably isolated. The target of the mission has been confirmed. It's a noble family in the imperial capital. Their methods are extremely vile. After a while, Najenda said angrily, they used sweet words to deceive others, brought passers-by to their home, and then tortured them to death. Unforgivable. Rotten to the core. All these rubbish must be removed. Living rubbish will only pollute the air. After the Revolutionary Army dominates the empire in the future, it will not be so rotten and sad. Boring. In fact, it's all the same. Dustless smiled and said nothing. In fact, there was nothing to despise. Although the empire was rotten to the core, the Revolutionary Army was probably not much better. Because greed was one of the human nature, this was uncontrollable unless all the humans in the world were completely wiped out. What's more, the Revolutionary Army was an organization. There must be internal intrigue. With the slow passage of time, decay was also a matter of time. In the end, you still become the nourishment of my infinite Tsukimi. Dustless raised his eyebrows slightly and said to himself, I remember that guy, Tatsumi, seemed to take this opportunity to join the night raid. Anyway, I have nothing to do. It's better to go out and play this time. Is everyone going to attack? Scarlet Eye asked very plainly, but there was a deep pain in her words. She held the katana in her right hand and seemed to be eager to kill the family. Najenda was slightly silent when she heard the words. She looked at Dustless. The other members were all veterans of the night raid. They had performed as many as dozens of missions. Of course, I have no problem. Dustless shrugged when he saw it. What a joke, no matter how strong the enemy was, even if it was a god, how could he be afraid of an ordinary human? That's the best. Nagenda's eyes were cold, the evil that justice can't punish, only we can come and kill it with a sword. The night was dark and windy, killing and arson were everywhere. In a luxurious castle like a villa, a few black shadows like crows suddenly flashed in the sky. Everyone's eyes were filled with crimson bloodthirsty light. Several people ignored the existence of gravity and stood quietly in the void. Only people with excellent eyesight and dynamic ability could catch the negligible thin line. This family is really evil. Looking up, staring at the abandoned warehouse in the distance, Dustless couldn't help but shake his head. The air was filled with the chill of decay and desolation. Through the vision of Tensigan, Dustless could see at least hundreds of corpses. Don't leave a single one alive. As soon as Scarlet Eye's voice fell, the people of the night raid jumped from the line and launched a one-sided bloody massacre. All the living creatures that they saw were killed. After all, they were assassins. There was no distinction between men and women, old and young. All the people of this family were killed. Chapter 1599. All in all, in a word, it was enough to kill one person. If there were two, he would kill a pair. It's really boring, killing those weak people. It's just an excuse to leave it to them. As for me, in the luxurious villa, Dustless wandered around. The life of this family was quite luxurious. The castle covered a large area, and there were countless corridors and corners. Strange, where did that guy go? Dustless murmured secretly, and carefully searched every room. He was looking for a person, Tatsumi. However, it seemed that there was no trace of Tatsumi even after searching the whole villa. Did I remember it wrong? Dustless said to himself. These were the memories of hundreds of years ago in his mind. After all, he had traveled for hundreds of years. It was normal for his memory to have some deviations. On the other side, the night raid was killing this family with all their strength. There were too many people in this family, especially countless servants, and professional soldiers. Obviously, they had a big background. Killing people was fast when everyone did it, but there were also some people who were lazy, such as Dustless. He had been wandering around in boredom, and he didn't kill anyone for a long time. Hey, 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 suddenly there was a dissatisfied complaint behind him. Dustless was stunned. He turned his head and saw a pretty girl with a pink double ponytail. Her appearance was delicate, her facial features were flawless, her bright eyes were as eye-catching as the moon, and her pink skirt was quite wonderful with her young body. The girl's figure was not plump, but it was undeniable that she was a person who knew how to dress herself very well. Her short body was not disappointing, combined with her pink skirt, it made people's eyes brighten. This girl with an extraordinary appearance was mine, the night raid's night raid. I'm performing a task, didn't you see? Dustless asked with a smile. Performing a task? Looking at Dustless suspiciously, Mine looked around and asked, "Where are the people you killed? I have been seeing you walking like an old man. You are lazy, right?" Mine asked loudly with her chest out. Dustless was powerful, but he turned a deaf ear to the fleeing crowd around him. What was he if not being lazy? Seriously, your breasts aren't big, what's there to stick out? Dustless lowered his head and complained. His voice was as soft as a mosquito, but he was too close to mine, so all these words fell into her ears. You! Mine stomped her feet angrily and immediately said with a straight face, "I'm going to report this to the boss, saying that you are slacking off in the process of performing the task." As soon as the voice fell, Mine looked at Dustless with delight. Her proud look was obviously saying, "Beg me." However, Dustless did not pay attention to her. "No, I'm not slacking off. I'm protecting you." Dustless glanced at the blurry black figure walking deeper into the forest and said calmly, "As a sniper, your close combatability is too weak. I'll follow you and be in charge of close combat. Protect me? Humph. What a load of nonsense. Mine hummed proudly and said loudly, your excuse is useless. You didn't kill anyone. I will report all to the boss. I didn't use your reward for this mission. After saying that, Mine turned and left. This is, however, at the moment when she just turned around, a black figure with flashing red eyes came quickly. It almost came to the front of Mine in an instant, and the big sword with cold light slashed toward Mine's head. All this happened in a flash, so that Mine was a little dazed. Your sniping is good, but your close combat is a so-so. If the enemy gets close to you, the disadvantage is too big. Dustless glanced at the attacker who was barely good, and flicked a light from his finger. Laser. A straight beam of light shot out and went straight to the person. Puff. There was suddenly a light on the head, and it was killed by the light from Dustless's fingertips. The person fell down unwillingly, and the big sword was a little distance away from crushing Mine. Damn it. Mine, who came back to her senses, scolded her carelessness. She just quarreled with Dustless, so she didn't notice the approaching attacker for the first time. If it weren't for Dustless, maybe her head would be separated from her body. I reluctantly recognize you. Mine said with a red face, and she was quite unwilling. Dustless stared at Mine maliciously after hearing the words. He put Mine in a checkmate and said with a smile, it's a big problem to be absent-minded when performing the task. I will report it to the boss as it is. You heartless guy. Mine pointed at Dustless's nose and scolded. Her hard-earned good impression of Dustless disappeared instantly. Dustless didn't say much after hearing the words. He just looked at the warehouse in the distance quietly. There was a strange color in his eyes that was difficult to detect. He vaguely understood why he didn't meet Tatsumi. Is it possible that Tatsumi was caught and tortured by this family? Dustless looked contemplative. The character of this family was so dark and cold that they deceived all the poor people who slept on the street into their home and then tortured them severely. Phew. At the same time, all the members of the night raid completed the task and appeared one after another. There is still a dirty place that has not been solved. We can retreat after burning the warehouse full of rotten smell. Pointing to the abandoned warehouse in the distance, Scarlet Pupil took the lead to rush there. I hope that Tatsumi dies. Following the footsteps of Scarlet Pupil, Dustless prayed silently. I can smell a disgusting stench from afar. Leonette took the lead to smash the door of the abandoned warehouse. As Dustless had guessed before, a devastated wail entered the eyes of several people. Come and save me, my name is Tatsumi. Chapter 1600. Come and save me, my name is Tatsumi. Dustless was taken aback by this sudden voice, and immediately rushed to the source. A miserable young man with wounds all over his body came into view. His hair was disheveled, and his entire body was covered with whip marks. The ghastly wounds were lacerated, and his flesh was badly mangled. However, the youth's eyes were bright and full of expression. Although he was severely injured, his strong will did not collapse. This kid is very tough. Dustless sighed to himself. He could see at a glance that Tatsumi was just physically tortured, and his physique was still very majestic. Clang 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 clang. Bullet raised his hand and cut off the chain on Tatsumi's body. He was surprised, after being tortured so severely, you can still live so tenaciously. It seems that you have received good training. Yes. Leonie also nodded slightly, thinking that this handsome boy was quite pleasing to the eye. You don't even know Tatsumi. Glancing at Leonie in surprise, Dustless found that Leonie didn't know Tatsumi. The scene in the original work probably didn't happen because of Dustless's sudden rise. So now Tatsumi was directly tortured by this perverted family. Cough cough cough. At this moment, there was a violent cough in the cell, which immediately attracted Tatsumi's attention. He cried and shouted, Ayas, how do you feel? Are you okay? He is incurable. Dustless came over and glanced at him and explained, He is implanted with the virus in his body. His face is pale and weak. Although he can still hold on, he is already dying. This is just the final radiance of the setting sun. He can't hold on for long. He is being observed like a white mouse, and his internal organs are corroded. You also know medical skills? Scarlet Eye and others were surprised. The members of the night raid often went out to perform tasks. Sometimes injuries were inevitable, and there was no suitable doctor among them. I just know a little bit. Dustless nodded slightly, and then said softly, if you are sick in the future, you can ask me for help. The patient is right in front of you. How dare you call yourself a doctor when you can't treat him? Tatsumi, who was desperate, roared. He was deeply shocked by the departure of his best friend. Back then, he had come here with a dream. Who would have thought that the imperial capital would have such a cruel start? Don't be unreasonable. Chi Tong and the others frowned. His internal organs had already been destroyed. Only a god would be able to save him. Let's retreat. Glancing slightly at Tatsumi, Dustless was too lazy to talk nonsense with this kid. Now he was just a madman. Cough, 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 wait a minute. At this moment, Iez, who was in Tatsumi's arms, suddenly opened his mouth and begged, I hope you can take Tatsumi with you. This country seems hopeless. Everyone is a monster in human skin. This, Scarlet Eye and others frowned when they heard the words. Their task did not include this unexpected task, but it seemed inappropriate to refuse the last plea of a dead person. This guy is not bad. If we strengthen his training, he can be of great use in the future. Brant, who was kind and generous, supported Tatsumi. Although some things have deviated, what should happen will still happen. Dustless sighed in his heart. He knew that Tatsumi joining the night raid was unstoppable. Although these people were assassins, not everyone was as experienced as Dustless. In the end, their inner kindness did not abandon them. It looks good on the surface. Leonie also nodded slightly, reluctantly agreeing with Brant's plan. Tatsumi was not bad. After being tortured, he was still energetic. Obviously, this piece of rotten jade was well polished. Then take him back for the time being. As for the specifics, it is up to the boss to decide. Scarlet Eye finally kicked the ball to Najenda. This kind of thing was not something she could decide. It could only be handled by Najenda. Lucky boy. Dustless was too lazy to say more. Looking at Tatsumi's relaxed face, this guy may think that joining the night raid is a good thing. There will be too many opportunities to clean him up in the future. Let's retreat. In the dark night, Dustless took the lead to turn into a black shadow and integrated into the darkness. The base of the night raid was brightly lit, and everyone gathered together. Tatsumi? Najenda sat in her position belonging to the boss, staring at Tatsumi, who was obviously still a teenager, with a little doubt and hesitation in her eyes. Boss, let me deal with this guy. After a month, I promise to train a different Tatsumi. Brant stood up and guaranteed. After all, Tatsumi was pulled in by him. It was too shameful to be kicked out. This guy is also a novice. Why do you have so many restrictions on me? Is it possible that he is handsome and can be recognized? Tatsumi stood up and questioned Dustless. Tatsumi, this kid, is talking about it. Dustless had a feeling of being shot while lying down. Yes, I am more handsome than you. If you don't believe me, you can ask everyone. Dustless raised his head proudly, his white skin was smooth like silk, and his facial features were extremely evenly distributed. He completely defeated Tatsumi, this super scum. Cough, cough, cough. If we're talking about looks, Wu Chen is more handsome than you. Brant stood up to help, and at the same time, he secretly scolded Tatsumi for being brainless. Why use your disadvantages to compare with others' advantages? Are you retarded? You, Tatsumi's face turned red when he heard the words, and he stared at Dustless indignantly. Suddenly, he felt that this face was an eyesore. It was simply a synonym for a jinx. Looking at each other can be contaminated with bad luck. Chapter 1601. You still want to fight with me? Looking at Tatsumi contemptuously, Dustless looked down on this guy. His companion's death could only be attributed to his incompetence. If he was a little smarter, this would not have happened. Tatsumi didn't need to have a high IQ, but he didn't have the least defense, so it was understandable that he was killed. You seem to have a problem with me. Staring at Tatsumi with a smile, Dustless said bluntly, I am the same as you. Just 3 days ago, I was still unemployed. Humph. Tatsumi snorted. It seemed that he disdained to talk to Dustless. Very arrogant. Dustless frowned when he saw this. Tatsumi gave people the feeling that he had eaten gunpowder. Why don't we have a fight? Then I think you have nothing to say. Will I be afraid of you? Come on. Tatsumi rolled his eyes and looked directly at Dustless's eyes without fear. In his cognition, Dustless had white skin, a handsome face, and a rich appearance. He looked like a noble young master, not like a professional assassin at all. Therefore, he thought that Dustless was just a facade. That's enough. Seeing the possibility of a fight, Boss Nagenda had to stand up and speak. Tatsumi's words also make sense. Dustless also joined the night raid 3 days ago. You two will learn the law of being an assassin with Akame tomorrow. Let's disperse now. She waved her hand, and the crowd dispersed. Damn it, I will compete with you privately. As a newcomer, I want to see what's the difference between you. Tatsumi clenched his fist with an expression of dissatisfaction. All in all, Tatsumi didn't feel that he was worse than Dustless. Staring at the direction where Dustless disappeared, Tatsumi also chased, but he didn't take a few steps. A burly figure like a mountain blocked in front of Tatsumi. Brother? The person who suddenly appeared was Bullet. Because Bullet pulled Tatsumi into the night raid, the relationship between the two was not bad. Bullet also took care of Tatsumi. Tatsumi, go back and rest. You will learn from Akame tomorrow morning. I will train you at night, Bullet said seriously. Tomorrow? Tatsumi nodded first and immediately did not hide it. He said directly, I am going to challenge Dustless now. That guy looks like a young master. I don't think he is special. Challenge him? Bullet's mouth twitched a few times, but Tatsumi didn't notice it. That's right. That guy is too arrogant. Also, everyone clearly doesn't recognize me. I want to use that guy to prove my strength. Tatsumi's eyes were like torches. In his heart, he regarded Dustless as a stepping stone. Idiot, don't be fooled by Dustless's appearance. He's actually very strong. Bullet said solemnly, and he was speechless. Tatsumi obviously didn't know what it meant to not judge a book by its cover. Don't be fooled by Dustless's handsome appearance. He doesn't look like a combatant. Although he looks harmless on the surface, like a knowledgeable scholar, but remember, all of this is superficial. Speaking of this, Bullet's tone was low, and his eyes were vaguely filled with respect. Is he stronger than brother? I heard that big sister Leonie said that you are known as the 100 Killer. Tatsumi's face was full of admiration. No matter which world, people respected the strong. Idiot. Bullet smiled bitterly and explained, 3 days ago, when we went to meet Dustless to join the night raid, he killed hundreds of elite soldiers in just a few minutes. Leonie didn't tell you this. She didn't tell you this because she didn't want to break your confidence. Killed hundreds of elite soldiers in a few minutes? Tatsumi showed a shocked expression, opened his mouth, and finally stared at Bullet's helpless cheeks and closed his mouth sullenly. He was choked by Bullet's words. In the dense jungle, 3 figures stood side by side. What does catching fish have to do with being a killer? It's digression. Tatsumi asked speechlessly, always feeling that he was used as a cook. This can't be helped. In the night raid, I am responsible for everyone's favorite food. Scarlet Pupil said as she walked, holding the roasted calf of dangerous species in her hand. Is this guy really as strong as brother said? With a sigh, Tatsumi secretly looked at Dustless, who had nothing to do, and his brows frowned. It's best to find a chance to test him. Tatsumi thought so. Soon, the three came to a vast pool. The water was very clear and very cool, and they could clearly see the swimming fish in the depths of the water droplets. You two can start. Pointing to the pool below, Scarlet Pupil continued to gnaw the meat in her hand and explained, today's lunch is to eat fish. The person who catches less has no food. No food? Splash. Tatsumi was stunned when he heard the words, and he jumped directly into the water without taking off his clothes. It's really boring. On the other hand, Wu Chen was just sitting lazily at the edge of the pond, teasing the little fishes that swam by comfortably as if he had nothing to do with it. He had a look of indifference. If you sit like this, there will be no food for lunch. Scarlet Pupil kindly reminded him. Anyway, I have lived for hundreds of years, let Tatsumi eat. Dustless had a magnanimous expression on his face. Although he said so, he smiled slyly in his heart. There seems to be a dangerous species under the water, an unexpected surprise. Staring at the super big fish full of fangs in the water droplets, Dustless smiled even more. Chapter 1602. Deep at the bottom of the lake, Tatsumi swam around vigorously, trying to catch these big fish. But he was obviously too inexperienced. This kind of fish was not an ordinary fish on the market. It was very vigilant. Tatsumi did not catch one but attracted the attention of a dangerous big fish with fangs. While he stared at other fish, he did not know that others had become others' dinner. Gulp. Looking at the right time, this super dangerous big fish took advantage of the situation. His big mouth with fangs that could bite steel went straight to Tatsumi. Tatsumi, leave quickly, you are being watched. Not everyone was as evil as Dustless. Scarlet Pupil just caught the dangerous species and stood up to remind Tatsumi. Tatsumi was shocked when he heard the words. He quickly turned his head and saw a dangerous species rushing toward him. Plop. At the critical moment, Tatsumi struggled to move his body and barely escaped from the tiger's mouth. This stupid fish. Dustless scolded angrily when he saw the situation. His eyes flashed with a cunning look. He thought in his heart, if you can't do it, let me help you. His pupils rippled with a considerable amount of eye power. The dangerous fish at the bottom of the water was suddenly controlled by Dustless. Tonight's dinner will be yours. After escaping a blow, Tatsumi's confidence soared. He decisively took out the steel sword tied to his back. Idiot, come up quickly. This dangerous species at the bottom of the water has an absolute advantage. Scarlet Pupil nervously reminded. Cough. Scarlet Pupil, there is no need to worry. Let this kid suffer. When he is in danger, we will teach him a lesson. Dustless took Scarlet Pupil's soft arm and smiled maliciously. Scarlet Pupil had taken off her top and bottom, revealing her smooth and delicate skin. Her figure was delicate, and her cleavage was unexpectedly high at a young age. Dustless did not expect Scarlet Pupil to suddenly take off her clothes, and he was a little stunned for a while. What are you looking at? Chi Tong's clear eyes were filled with doubt. She subconsciously looked down at her body, thinking that she had been stained with something dirty. When she met Dustless's gaze, she couldn't help but blush. Cough, cough, cough. Hurry up and put on your clothes. Leave the task of saving Tatsumi to me. Dustless patted his chest and promised. It was just a dangerous species. At the same time, the war at the bottom of the sea came to an end. Plop. The dangerous species controlled by Dustless, with a super tail swing, hit Tatsumi and made him vomit blood. Even because the force was too strong, it directly threw Tatsumi to the shore and heavily hit the ground. TSK TSK TSK. Tatsumi is really embarrassed. Chi Tong and Dustless walked to the front of Tatsumi and looked at the bruised Tatsumi. Dustless was fine, but Chi Tong could not tolerate it. This is all because of your arrogance. If this was a one-off mission, you might have caused the entire team to be wiped out. Chi Tong's tone was extremely serious, completely different from her usual naive self. Tatsumi's mouth squirmed when he heard the words, and he lowered his head in shame. Sorry, I was impulsive. TSK. Dustless smacked his lips in an extremely harsh manner, silently mocking Tatsumi. You, Tatsumi raised his eyes and looked at Dustless. His contemptuous eyes seemed to say, why are you so useless? You can't even deal with a fish. Catch it if you have the guts. Tatsumi said indignantly, otherwise, please shut your mouth. You will be hungry with me at noon. Dustless did not catch any fish now. Dustless, Chi Tong's gaze also swept to Dustless, looking forward to his method. Catch it? It's very simple. Unexpectedly, Dustless suddenly sat on the ground and stared at the dangerous big fish in the water with clear eyes. He explained, this is a dangerous species called swordbone fish. It is quite dangerous. It is as terrible as its name. Its bones can be used to make swords. At the same time, its defense is very strong. Let alone in the water, even on land, it is difficult to hurt it. After all, you can't do it. Tatsumi's shattered confidence finally recovered a little. No, it's actually very simple to catch them. Dustless showed a meaningful smile and said faintly, this kind of super dangerous species is very strange. Due to its strong strength, the food that it replenishes is not proportional to its consumption, so it has a period of dormancy to recover its physical strength. It's almost time. Why do you know so clearly and so knowledgeable? Tatsumi and Chi Tong were both stunned and quite surprised. Grew. Just at this moment, an extremely human-like voice suddenly sounded. Looking over, it was indeed as Wu Chen had said. This dangerous species of big fish was actually snoring on the surface of the lake. Good opportunity. Tatsumi's eyes lit up. He wanted to catch the dangerous species, but the tingling all over his body made him unable to move. On the contrary, Dustless looked at him with a smile and said, you can train if you are not strong enough, but it's your fault if you are uneducated. Eat less snacks and read more books in the future. Damn bastard. Looking at Dustless who left, Tatsumi looked unlucky. He seemed to have become a negative example. Dustless is right. You have to know how to apply what you have learned. He has read a lot of books these days. His learning ability is very strong. Chi Tong looked at Dustless admiringly. The biggest difference between a smart person and a fool was that he would apply everything he had learned to reality. 10,000 Mammoth Heaven. A strong gravitational force was emitted from his hand, and the sleeping dangerous species was suddenly caught by Dustless. Let's go back. Dustless stretched his body and said lazily. The dangerous big fish was floating in the sky. It was particularly shocking in the eyes of Tatsumi and Chi Tong. Chapter 1603. At noon, it was time for lunch at the base of the night raid. Many members of the night raid were eating around the table. Dustless was naturally among them, but Tatsumi was miserable. He stood aside with bandages all over his body and watched the people eating, drooling. But no one cared about him. Who let him fail his mission? In the end, it was Dustless who benefited. Najenda, who heard about the incident, not only did not sympathize with Tatsumi, but she secretly scolded that he was hopeless. In the water, fighting with dangerous fish species, wasn't this a stupid behavior? For a time, Tatsumi became the villain boss and became the focus of everyone's attack. Dustless smiled and said nothing. He was attacking Tatsumi comfortably while watching the show. Bullet also had a headache. After all, he promised to train Tatsumi in a month. Now it seemed that there was some pressure. If I can't defeat Tatsumi in a month, my reputation will be ruined. Looking up at the ceiling, Bullet suddenly regretted. He was obviously digging a hole to bury himself. Not good. At this moment, Lubbock suddenly exclaimed and said in a deep voice, our base was invaded. The target of the sneak attack was still 1 or 2 people, but there were as many as 7 or 8 people. Good job. Najenda blew a smoke ring and ordered in a cold voice, "It's probably those aliens. They dare to go deep alone, which is worthy of praise, but they chose the wrong opponent." Due to the urgency of the situation, the night raid, all members are dispatched. As the boss, Najenda's voice just fell. All the members of the night raid were dispatched urgently. Everyone was obviously experienced and jumped out of the window. Only Dustless continued to eat as if nothing had happened. This time all members are dispatched. Looking at Dustless, who was standing still, Najenda repeated again, "For an assassin, if you are too lazy, your body will rust." No, Dustless just shook his finger and said, "Boss, the more shrewd the eagle is, it usually hides its sharp claws. When it is critical, it will show its ferocious side. So, this kind of small thing can be done by them." That's true." Thinking of Dustless's record in the capital, Najenda also felt that she was overqualified. Although Dustless was a newcomer, his strength was definitely second to none in the night raid. Just now, the boss was talking to Leona about something. It should be about another quest. Dustless asked calmly, "I heard that recently there's a guard captain named Oka. That guy has done a lot of bad things. The mission we received this time should be related to him." "How did you guess?" Najenda looked horrified. "That's simple." Dustless smiled calmly. "First of all, the corrupt officials of the Empire have always been the first target of the night raid. Secondly, that Appa has done a lot of bad things and has countless enemies. I heard that the night raid had accepted the mission to assassinate Oka before, but the mission ended in failure. It's right to invite you to join, night raid." Najenda showed a satisfied smile and then sighed. To be honest, Isteth has solved the war with a few races at the border in advance. Now she is on her way to the capital. She may return to the capital in a day or two. "So the boss is going to kill some scum in advance?" Dustless asked and affirmed, "I'm afraid that Isteth will rush back when she heard that I was in the capital." After all, Dustless bullied her once. It was normal for this woman with a strong desire for battle to want to retaliate. Yes, so these days, we should try to eradicate those scum who have no conscience. Najenda's eyes were like torches, shining with bright colors. "Let me deal with it." Looking at the blue void through the window, Dustless took the initiative to volunteer. He had no good feelings for this deceitful empire. They inexplicably wanted to arrest him. Dustless naturally wanted to retaliate. "Of course, there is no problem. There is also an oil merchant who colluded with Oka. This time, we will also kill him. As for the specific candidates to carry out this mission, it will be Akame and Leone, plus you and Tatsumi. Leone is familiar with the capital. Where to ambush Oka and the oil merchant, you guys decide by yourselves." Taking a deep breath, Najenda finally ordered. Her original intention was to let Dustless train Tatsumi. Tatsumi, who had not been baptized by the battlefield, was always a greenhouse flower. Hee, of course, no problem. Wu Chen's smile became more and more terrifying. It made people's hair stand on end. He didn't have a good impression of Tatsumi. He even hated this guy. He didn't like him. It would be best if he had a chance to get rid of him. On the other side, Tatsumi was trembling, and an indescribable chill spread all over his body. "Why do I feel like I am being stared at by the devil?" Tatsumi, who was carrying out the mission with Bullet and others, muttered to himself. His body was trembling uncontrollably. Pucci. 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 In less than 10 minutes, the invaders were all slaughtered by the night raid. They were just ordinary soldiers, and although the members of the night raid were few in number, they could be said to be strong enough to fight against 100. Dealing with these shrimp soldiers and crab generals was naturally a piece of cake. There was not the slightest problem. After half an hour, everyone came back safe and sound. After the arrangement of Boss Najenda, Dustless, Tatsumi, Akame and Leone gathered together to discuss some necessary plans. Then they decided to sneak into the capital at night to kill Oka and the oil merchant. Chapter 1604. A bleak night, a bleak wind, a bleak imperial capital, and a few bleak silhouettes. This combination was the most suitable. The decaying empire and the corrupt garbage needed them to clean up. You two go assassinate the oil merchant. As for Oka, leave it to me and Tatsumi. Dustless promised and pulled Tatsumi with a smile. It's just a captain of the guards. We will definitely solve him, right, Tatsumi? Right? Right your ass. Tatsumi nodded on the surface, but he secretly slandered in his heart. After all, it was his first mission. It was normal to be nervous. After all, Tatsumi was just a newcomer. Especially, he teamed up with Dustless, his enemy. This guy is more dangerous and terrible than the captain of the guards. Tatsumi was full of vigilance. If he could, he really didn't want to be with such a dangerous person like Dustless. No. At this moment, Scarlet Pupil suddenly looked determined. She looked at Dustless and Tatsumi and said in a deep voice, that Oka is too dangerous. He is the captain of the Imperial Capital's guards. It is safer for the four of us to go together. You go? How can I cheat Tatsumi if you go? Dustless complained helplessly in his heart. He was helpless to Scarlet Pupil's insistence. After all, she belonged to the captain level. Then let's go. Dustless could only compromise. Then the four of them disappeared under the night sky. It was not impossible to cheat Tatsumi in another way. Anyway, this guy was stupid. He knew that he was easy to cheat just by looking at his face. It is really the most comfortable to drink after the interrogation. On the street, a ferocious-looking man shouted. His appearance was terrible and very gloomy. His face was dark, and his eyes sometimes jumped with raging light. At first glance, he was not a good person. That Master Oka, at this moment, a worried and scared voice suddenly sounded behind him. Who are you? Oka was stunned and turned his head to look. It was a boy in a robe. Oh, no, it was a girl. This person's appearance was extremely strange. Damned Dustless, if you fail, I'll skin you alive. Tatsumi, who was disguised as a young girl, roared fiercely in his heart. Because of Dustless's bad idea, he had to pretend to be a beautiful young girl. What made Tatsumi break down the most was that Leonie and Scarlet Pupil agreed without distinguishing right from wrong. A beautiful girl, no matter who it is, will relax their vigilance around you. Dustless explained to Tatsumi before leaving. But even so, Tatsumi, who was disguised as a young girl, was not bad, and he was barely acceptable. But, some people were born to belong to the strange type, such as Oka. He stared at Tatsumi for a moment, and then his face flashed with anger and killing intent. Get away from me, you damned transvestite. Ugly bastard. I, Lord Oka, have a normal sexual orientation. Do you think I can't recognize a little brat who pretends to be a beauty? Die. Oka shouted angrily. He found that his IQ was underestimated. Then he waved his fist in anger and smashed it at Tatsumi unceremoniously. All of this happened in a flash. Oka hit Tatsumi's cheek with his strength, and Tatsumi was still immersed in the 3 words that Oka insulted him, ugly bastard. How hurtful it is to my self-esteem. Boom boom boom. Tatsumi was smashed 5 or 6 meters away. His head was bleeding, and he almost fainted on the spot. Cough cough cough, this is an accident. Witnessing Tatsumi's disguise being seen through and being beaten by Oka, Dustless was stunned and quickly distanced himself from it. At the same time, he said in a blaming tone, Tatsumi is too immature after all. His acting skills are too bad. If it was me, I can definitely deceive Oka to other allies to kill him. You bastard. Akame and Leonie were speechless when they heard the words. You are obviously deliberately deceiving others. Oka was not an idiot. Although Tatsumi looked like a girl after disguising, Oka, who was a veteran in dealing with women, could see the clues of Tatsumi at a glance. Poor Tatsumi was deceived by Dustless. Say, Who sent you to approach me? Especially with such an ugly disguise, who do you think I am? Could it be that you think that I would be fooled by a few broken branches and withered willows? Can't you figure out the direction? Oka pulled out his sword and asked. The cold light reflected by the broad blade shone on Tatsumi's face. What a terrifying murderous aura. Tatsumi was full of fear. Fear flowed in his eyes. Looking at Oka who was approaching, his body retreated uncontrollably. Cold sweat fell like rain. You are too timid. You are useless. Dustless and others who were watching in the dark shook their heads. Although they were exposed because they were not prepared, Tatsumi's performance today was really unflattering. Instead of saying that he was an assassin, he looked more like a guilty conscience. I guess you are the member who specializes in assassinating dignitaries. Night raid? Very good, very good. I need your head to give me a promotion. Oka showed a devilish smile and immediately walked toward Tatsumi who was scared out of his wits. Retreat. Tatsumi suddenly remembered the instructions of Dustless and others in his mind. He quickly rushed to a place with few people. After all, it was still on the street. He ran to the dark alley without stopping. Oka, who followed, regarded Tatsumi as a prey in his heart. Perhaps he thought that the other members of the night raid were the same as Tatsumi, ordinary people. You're tuning into the Dreamy Love Stories YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.